and welcome to the March 2018 meeting of the Falmouth Conservation Commission. Before we get going, I see a lot of people that we don't usually see here, so I will say, please, everyone silence your devices while you're in the room. And also, if anyone would like to address the board and the public, you're more than welcome to do so, but we have to have you come to the lectern and identify yourself, introduce yourself, and you need to use the microphone for the sake of the TV audience. It's not so much for our sake here. Okay, so having done with the preliminaries, the first order of business is to vote minutes, and listed here is minutes for the March 21 meeting. However, there was no March 21st meeting. We had, well,
Then I'll make a motion
no,
that we can do it.
later, please. We had to cancel, or we decided we had to cancel for the weather. We knew we had a number of applicants' representatives coming from off Cape, so we opted to do that. And I will just mention at this point that this is a subject we'll be discussing some more under other business at the end of tonight's meeting, in case anybody wants to stay for that. Okay, minutes of March 26th. Betsy.
I had one change, which I told Susan, and that is when we were talking about the Quaker Road, and I said that we had agreed that there would be extra trees, and I had said no more than 6, and Jen is going to check it, rather than in the minutes it was at least 6.
No, it was no more than 6
Yeah.
in the order.
Right. And with that, I make a motion.
So, yeah, just so that,
To
so you're saying
accept-
that the minutes should be corrected. even
Yeah,
though
she
the
already
order is
corrected.
Okay,
Yeah, she already has corrected it.
got it, okay.
And I make a motion to accept as discussed.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, unanimous, so moved.
Aye.
Okay, now we have a couple requests for continuance under a notice of intent. First is Brewer Fiddler's Cove Marina, care of Fred Sorrento, Fiddler's Cove Entrance Channel, North Falmouth, Massachusetts, for permission to dredge up to 500 cubic yards of sand from the entrance channel to Fiddler's Cove Canal.
Yes, Madam Chairman, the applicant is requesting a continuance to the May 2nd hearing.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say
Second.
aye.
Aye.
Opposed, unanimous, so moved. Next, Wigwam, Sipawasset Trust, 8 Wigwam Road, West Falmouth, Massachusetts. This one has been read several times into the record, so I'm not going to repeat myself tonight.
They're requesting a continuance until April 18th.
How many continuances?
Yeah.
2 so far.
So moved then.
Second.
All
April
those in
18th.
favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, unanimous, so moved.
I'm sorry, Mary, who,
I moved it.
okay.
I don't know who seconded.
Did I second it? Either Courtney or
I think I
Courtney
second,
did.
yeah.
Okay, now we go to request for determination of applicability. And just so everybody can follow what's going on with these, in this, for this type of request, if there's a negative determination by the board, that is what the applicant wants to hear. It means that the applicant does not need to go to a higher level of review. Okay, Falmouth Agricultural Commission, Old Meeting House Road, map 28-05-003A-000, East Falmouth, Massachusetts, for permission to clear bog platform of overgrown scrub pines and to mow exterior ditch edges.
Yes, Madam Chairman, there's 2 parts. Well, there's the RDA and also a request. So the commission is requesting a -2 under the state and bylaw with the resource area boundaries not confirmed. And on both this RDA and your next RDA, the Agricultural Commission is also simultaneously asking for permission to work on land under the care and control of the Conservation Commission.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to read the other one and vote separately, though. All right. Any comments or questions from the board?
Yes. Are these part of the Coonamessett system? I can't remember.
No, they are not.
Is it?
Okay.
I mean,
Yes, they're in the Coonamessett
They-
Valley. They were part of a series of bogs, but they are not directly on the river.
They're
So they're-
town-owned and they're not part of the restoration project.
Okay, and they're not, are these being cultivated or they just want to, I mean, in other words, I'm trying to understand why they're doing this.
Yeah, Karen, would you like to tell us? Thank you.
Karen Schwalbe, Chair of the Falmouth Agricultural Commission. The intent is to see if it is feasible to put them back into production. So they have been out of production for a period of at least 3 years, which is one of the reasons we're here before you. And we would like to see if it can be done, but we need to do some work on it to make sure we don't go out of compliance. So,
Okay. But they are part of that river system, the Coonamessett River system?
So they are not directly on the river, but these two bogs were identified as potential bogs that could be used for community access in the future because they're not directly discharging into the
Where I'm
river.
going is the drainage system, do these
Does not.
bogs?
No.
No?
No.
Okay.
Good.
Okay.
Just a clarification on Karen's comment.
Sure.
They've been out of production since 2013. So it is the 5 years, so they're
We're
seeking
coming up on
to,
that 5 years.
Right.
seeking to maintain the bogs so they don't trip the 5-year
State.
state, you know.
They lose that.
Agricultural land and agricultural.
Okay.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Wendy, please.
Hi, I'm Wendy Bissler, President of the Coonamessett River Trust. When we were first advocating our plan to restore the Coonamessett River, we had identified these bogs as potential bogs that could still be kept in cranberry production if the town so wished, because they are kind of separate from the river. We do hope that if they do come back into production, if the AgCom does find it's feasible, that we hope they're consider using organic practices, and we hope that any water usage will not impact the fisheries there, the herring or the brook trout. But I've talked to Karen, and we've talked about the Agricultural Commission and the Coonamessett River Trust meeting, and so we could talk about these issues so it could be mutually beneficial to both of us. We think it's a terrific idea to have a community cranberry bog. I think that would be a real asset to the town. And I think if we can work together to make this happen, I think it would be a really good thing. So, thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous, so moved. And
Betsy seconded it. I firsted.
just to round this out, read into the record and vote on the other bog in question, Falmouth Agricultural Commission, Thomas Landers Road, map 21-05-0111-000, East Falmouth, Massachusetts, for permission for the same use as was
And
just
again, Madam
discussed.
Chairman, our recommendation is a -2 under the state and the bylaw with the resource area boundaries now confirmed.
So moved.
Second.
All right, any questions or comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous, so moved. Okay, now, turning to requests for hearings under a notice of intent. First tonight, Stephen and Ann Sherman, 28 Nichols Road, East Falmouth, Massachusetts, for permission to construct an addition, install a new Title V sewage disposal system, remove the existing shed, retaining wall, trees, install new retaining walls, native trees, and mitigation plantings, and the associated clearing, excavating, grading, and landscaping. I have a little statement to read about the notices of intent. All hearings of the Falmouth Conservation Commission are held simultaneously under the authorities of the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act and the Falmouth Wetlands Bylaw. Although a single decision of the commission is issued, it represents a separate decision under each authority. Thank you, and good evening, welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. For the record, Matt Costa, Cape and Islands Engineering. representing the applicant. Mr. Sherman is here with me tonight in the back of the audience. As you said in your public statement, the property is located at 28 Nichols Road. And we're here tonight under a notice of intent application for primarily a proposed addition. We're also going to be installing a Title V leach field in the front yard and associated mitigation plantings. Your resource areas for this project include land under the ocean, coastal beach, salt marsh, BBW, coastal bank, and land subject to coastal storm flowage. In this case, there's actually two flood zones on the property. There's there's one flood zone on the property, flood zone velocity zone VE, elevation 13, that runs along in the front, and there's the associated 25-foot buffer that goes along with that. Some of you might be familiar with this project. It's right at the fronts right on LaQuoit Bay on the east side of Seapier Road Peninsula there. And we were in front of the commission in 2014, late 2014, to do some improvements on the property. And that's when Mr. Sherman purchased this property here. At that time, there was actually, the prior owner had a fire pit. I don't know if anybody would remember this, but there was a fire pit that was built out on the front bluff without the benefit of a permit. And Mr. Sherman came on board. He had all of that stuff removed, bringing the project in compliance, and then we went through the process of doing some additions to the house. We received a certificate of compliance, and I believe it was early 2015. So what the need is now is he would like to have an addition on the side of this house. The addition would be is shown on your plans in a orange color. It would be built on a typical foundation. The only thing that's unique about this addition is that there's a second floor connection to it. So you actually walk on the ground. There'll still be a walkway, the open air walkway that walks underneath this addition where it connects to the house. There's existing retaining wall in that general area. That retaining wall is going to be relocated. We'll regrade around here. This work for the addition is entirely within your Zone A, so the 3-to-1 mitigation ratio is required here. We broke out all the mitigation calculations in a table that's shown on the left side of the plan for you. It shows all of the hardscape areas and proposed building. It shows the net increase or decrease in the required calculations. In this particular case, for this addition, the total required mitigation plantings, as calculated under the bylaw, are 729 square feet. We're proposing 857 square feet of mitigation plantings. We also are proposing to remove 3 significant oak trees in the area of the proposed addition. Those oak trees add up to approximately 50 caliper inches of tree, and we're proposing to replace 6 to 7 inch tupelos, 8 trees total. So we're proposing a net of between 48 and 56 caliper inches of mitigation. So that effectively exceeds the mitigation requirements under the bylaw for development in the buffer zone. Where we're proposing this mitigation is a little unique from what you would typically see, because you're used to seeing it right along the waterfront. In this case, that's actually not the closest point to the resource areas. If you take a look at this, on the west side of the property, your southwest side, that's where a salt marsh and BBW tail in and come right up close to the property line. We're proposing the bulk of the mitigation right in this area in an effort to satisfy the requirements of the bylaw and having that mitigation located as close to the resource areas as possible. Also, this is in an area where there is natural vegetation that it abuts, so it would be augmenting that and expanding that natural buffer area. In this particular area right now, we're proposing this mitigation. There's a shed, which we are proposing to remove. There's an ornamental 2-inch weeping cherry, which we're proposing to remove, and some ornamental plantings, and then lawn area. So we're going to remove the ornamental plantings, we're going to remove the lawn area of the shed, and replant that entire left side of that house with mitigation plantings and a total of 5 of the proposed 8 tupelo trees. The only thing that we're going to leave over here is a grass path that will be for access around the structure. Now, the total mitigation proposed in this area is 1,752 square feet. So that exceeds the 1,729 square feet that we are required to have. So we have satisfied the requirement in applying the mitigation to a portion of the property that's as close to the resource areas as possible, and that would expand naturally vegetated buffer areas. There's also a second mitigation area that we're proposing, and that's up on the northeast side of the property, where the dock, where the stairs that lead to the dock are located. We're proposing mitigation in area that's existing lawn there. The reason for this area is just to go the extra mile in adding some additional mitigation. And we chose this area because, again, it's immediately adjacent to natural vegetation. So we're expanding that natural buffer area. We're also proposing 3 of the trees, mitigation trees, up in this area as well, with the logic being that, although that's not the closest point to the resource area, it's also where we were taking out trees. So to try to balance the project. We are also proposing to temporarily remove some existing evergreen trees that are in the front right of the property, where the proposed septic system is being will be located. We're going to temporarily pick those trees up and move them out of the way, install the system, and replant them. There's 2 particular trees that we're going to have to move a little bit further away from the proposed system, but those trees will just be kept on site. They'll be healed in someplace while they do the system, and they'll be able to put them back. So we will not, none of those trees will be effectively removed in the end. And they'll all be located in that general area, which is actually in the buffer zone B area. We believe that this project meets all of the applicable performance standards, which we have articulated in our narrative, and we respectfully request you issue an order of conditions. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Jen, do you want to lead this off?
Yeah, I just have a few questions. Matt, do you know when the shed went in?
I don't know exactly, but it was within the last couple of years.
Is it do you know if it's permitted?
I don't believe there was a permit for it.
Then it can't be used for mitigation, so that'll have to be taken out.
It went into a stone area where the AC pads are, and the shed was it's a small shed that was delivered to the site. It's being taken out.
I understand that, but you're using it for your mitigation calculations. I can't confirm that it went into a stone area, so, I mean, I can't confirm that, so.
Well, we can confirm that on the as-built plan that was done for the certificate of
It's not
compliance.
shown on the as-built plan.
I would probably have pictures of it, actually.
I'm not here to argue with you, Matt. If you can't prove that the shed was properly permitted, it cannot be used for mitigation purposes, so you'll have to readjust your mitigation. I'm sorry. Other question, your tupelo trees, Matt, you have 6 to 7 inch diameter on here. Do you mean feet or diameter?
Diameter.
That's a big tree.
It's a very big tree. It's
With
a
an
very expensive
enormous
tree.
root ball.
Yep, and I've talked to Dale, and we've gone over this, and he actually is just waiting for us to order the trees.
How big is the root ball on a 6 to 7 inch diameter tree?
My guess would probably be around 6 feet.
Hmm?
He can plant all of these with a bobcat, and he has access. We've gone over the site. He has full confidence and access to to all these locations, and we actually picked the spacing on the trees to be adequate spacing as well.
That's a big tree. Okay, and second, the third issue, did I see an irrigation system when I went there?
I don't know.
Pretty sure I did. Just to remind your client that the 2014 order of conditions said there's to be no in-ground irrigation system. I do believe I saw one. I have to double check my pictures and go back out there. If there is an in-ground irrigation system, it will need to be removed. It was not allowed in the 2014 order of conditions, so you may want to check that. And you and I met about this project prior to tonight. I did express and say that the commission was most likely going to have concerns about the 3 oak trees. They'll address that. And I'm not a fan of running the mitigation up the sides of properties. I understand your reasoning that it's closest to the DPW in that area. It'll probably, be beneficial to most in that area, but this is not a practice I want to see all the time. So just keep that in mind going forward. And that's it. And if you can give me something on that shed map, that'd be helpful, but, and that was it.
Okay. Kevin?
I'm fine, thank you.
All right, Courtney?
Mildly, I would echo what Jen has to say about the buffer. I think I'd like to see something on that side, or the water, rather than pushed off to the side. I realize people want to get a view, but we also need a buffer.
It's about practicality too. I mean, you have an armored coastal bank there, and there would be an isolated planted strip, or essentially be a bed. It'd have no habitat value whatsoever to it. We did think about it, and it is literally, this is the closest area to the resource areas, and the bonus mitigation planting we're doing was to augment and to expand that natural buffer. To put them along top of the bank, and I hear what you're saying, and logic applies to most projects that way. This one's a little different with the location of the resource areas. I just saw it as isolated plantings that were going to be not much more than a planted bed. So
Okay.
I hear what you're saying, but that's the logic we went with.
Yep, that's all I did.
Okay, Maureen?
Did you already get your septic permit?
Not yet.
So it's gonna have 2 systems on 1 lot.
I reviewed this with the agent.
Okay. And I have to concur with with the 2 people that already spoke about the mitigation. And where the weeping cherry is being taken away, the 2-inch weeping cherry, if you take your ruler from the salt marsh, that's 45 feet to where that weeping cherry is. And on the coastal bank to the salt marsh is 25 feet on the top of the coastal bank. So if you removed, because now the shed mitigation isn't going to probably count, that whole area up there from where the weeping cherry is to the road could be put down in this corner and make it a much better habitat on the coastal bank in that corner where you've already started to put some. Just take that square and put it in
By
front.
the stairs?
Yep, yep. With a path to the stairs, and then that bank would get some protection. And it's all lawn, so that means when they fertilize, it all runs off. Even though we know that there's no fertilizing on this property, because it's all within 100 feet, but we know they will do that. So at least if the shrubbery is there, that will prevent it, the mitigation.
Help.
It would help. Also, my big concern with those large trees is that you put them right on the property line and they already have a canopy. The canopy is will already extend when they're planted over the property lines. So they have to grow in their full and mature ability, and putting them right on the property line, I think the way you have them, they're about 2.5 feet off. Well, the ball, you can't even plant the ball. The ball is 6 feet across.
Yeah, they're a little bit more than that.
Well, not all of them. The one up in that corner is 2.5 feet. The one up in the top corner by the addition, the center of that tree to the lot line is 2.5 feet. If my scale is 1 to 20. So you just said the ball was 6 feet across. So we already know that that can't even fit there. And then the other tree, the next one down, is 4.5 feet. So again, there'll be compromise. You're taking the tree out of the 18-inch oak out of the A buffer. Unfortunately, now there are only 5 oaks on that property, and you're taking 3 of the best ones off, and there are 2 left now. And you're taking the ones that are in the A zone. So I'm very concerned about that you could not rethink maybe the addition being pushed back a little bit further, so that you didn't have to take down all the oaks. And the other thing is, was a wood fence permitted on the last order of conditions?
Yeah, that fence has been there for many, many years.
I was
I don't know
asking
if
Jen.
it's permitted.
All right, we'll just check that too. And let's see what else. All mitigation crammed. That's it for right now. Oh, what species are the ones that you're removing up here by the new septic?
Of trees?
Yeah,
They're like spruces and some of them, I think maybe even an arborvitae or so. They're just like evergreen.
okay. You should put it on there because if they're Leland cypresses, they're not natives, and if you're taking so much effort to save a non-native and you're cutting down natives, it's kind of counterproductive. Thank you.
Thanks, Maureen. Betsy?
I'm going to talk about the oaks too. This is natural vegetation in the A zone, and I don't believe that any expansion should take place there. And so I can't vote for this project. But I also want to leave you with something positive in that I found your plan extremely easy to follow, and I appreciate that. This plan is a work of art. It could go up on the art wall.
Thank you, Betsy.
You're welcome.
I wish you'd reconsider the tree thing. I try to practice, I think employing empathy when designing things is a good strategy. And I look at it as if I own this property myself, and I'm trying to balance the property owner's rights with the intent of the regulations and protecting the better good, the environment for the better good of the public. That's why we have these performance standards. So we really did try to work within the performance standards to meet those and supply more than what's required for mitigation.
And I do appreciate that, but it encourages people, if those of you who were on the board maybe a year ago can remember that I said the same thing in a little tiny lot that was somewhere in East Falmouth, and most of the board members didn't agree with me at the time, but the homeowner went back and came back and said, we've redesigned, we've taken that into consideration, we want to keep that tree. And I'm hoping if the homeowner is here, somewhere out there, I'm hoping you go and look at what beautiful trees they are and think of how to redesign the project.
I certainly appreciate that, and I love trees.
No, not now, sir. Sorry. You'll have a chance later.
It was one of the first things I suggested is why don't we look at the addition and try to move it around to save some. It was actually after my first meeting with Jen. And the second story connection to it, that's the only way it's connected to the dwelling, and that's how they access it. And the architect just did not find any other way. So we were tasked with moving forward with the addition as is. So I did think about that, and we did, try to get the people involved to revisit that.
No, and I do appreciate that. You put a lot of thought into where things are. I think some mitigation along this, whatever
Southwest.
direction, it's southwest is appropriate. I agree some of it could be moved to the other side, but I appreciate it. I'm just explaining.
I'm trying to win you back.
Oh, you haven't won me back, but I'm just explaining where I come from. That's all.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you. Jamie?
Is the limit of work defined on here? It is, I don't see it.
Well, it's a work of art.
That's.
Subtle.
That's unfortunate. I don't show the limit of work on here.
Can you add that to the plan?
I
I
most.
thought I saw it staked out, but
It's
It's
staked in the field.
Right.
It's staked,
Yeah, it
it
is.
didn't plot. It exists, it's just invisible to you on this
On
plan.
this piece of harbor.
so this is gonna be for an accessory apartment?
No,
No?
this is for grandchildren.
Far enough away.
No, I guess that's not our problem. Two septics on the same property. For what it's worth, Jen, the shed, if it was under 100 square feet, it wouldn't need a permit?
It needs a permit from the compound,
Okay.
not the building permit.
Okay.
We're not building, we're Concom. And it's
Um,
within 50 feet of that BBW?
Yeah, that's all I have.
Yep. About 30 feet away.
All set?
And it's only about 55 from the salt
Steve?
marsh.
Well, I was impressed with your effort, obviously recognizing there'd be some concern about the trees to plant these monsters for us. In what we see, anything 2 inches is these are substantial trees, and it seems to be an effort on your part to recognize that there was going to be some concern about the removal of existing oaks.
And it was the applicant who was very willing to get literally the biggest things that we could fit on there. And this cost for trees grow exponentially as the size grows. This is an endeavor to pull it off.
Thank you. I just thought, I recognized that there was an issue with removing those trees. I thought replanting the other trees was also something that I hadn't experienced before, and I think they were all firs or pines or something like that. As I looked at them, I'm not sure what species they were, but I thought that was a creative as well. So those are my only comments, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Peter?
How many feet are those large trees from the different landmarks, like the coastal bank and so forth?
Well, some of them are on the coastal bank, or what would be classified as coastal bank. Which trees might you be talking about in particular?
The large oak trees.
Oh, the existing, the
Yeah.
3 existing.
50 feet.
Excuse me, Tim, I just want to interrupt you for a second. Gentlemen, if you're going to continue a conversation, we'd appreciate having it outside. Thank you. Excuse me, go ahead.
50-foot line goes right in there.
That 50-foot buffer line,
Well,
you see a line with an A in it?
Are they outside the 50-foot or?
2 of them are, one of them, the 50-foot runs right through it.
Right through it.
Okay. And additional question, could you clarify, you have an existing 5-bedroom septic tank and leach pit, and there is a proposed 3-bedroom septic system and septic tank. You have 2 systems?
Yeah, so we have, there is area in here that will qualify as a bedroom. So we have to add additional capacity. We have existing septic system that is functioning for 5 bedrooms now. The minimum system that you can install is 3 bedrooms. So we're proposing 3 right now to take care and satisfy the requirements for the addition. And what we're expecting is that at some point in time, that older system would need to be upgraded, and we would expand on that 3 that
So-
exists.
So how old is the existing system, and would it meet the present-day requirements?
It doesn't meet current Title V requirements, but it does pass it does pass the Title V inspection. So it is suitable for use.
So okay.
Passes.
All set?
Yep.
Okay. Mark?
Well, on the southwest side, I like the mitigation you've put in there. I think that's the best location for that part of it. It's sort of a shame we've got that easement you've got to keep open.
which it'd be nice if you could bring the planning right down to the thicket that's right next to that easement, but that's too bad. I think up in the top northeast corner, I think you could certainly put more there. I mean, I think it's a good idea to get more mitigation right near the water.
So people were saying the southwest side. You're saying northeast side now?
Let's see where yeah, northeast, right up at the property corner where the dock access is. I don't know, I mean, unfortunately, you got to get to that little pier at the dock stairs, but that tiny little strip is kind of a boundary planning. It's not much of a mitigation, frankly. It goes up against that big shrub. I can't even remember what it was. Was it a rhodie or something? Okay, well, beyond that, the only thing I noticed, which we haven't talked about at all, which is kind of relevant, there's a bunch of plastic pipes down on the beach that are used to drag up, I presume they're used to drag boats up onto the beach, onto the grass there. And I don't know, you guys looked at it, but that's something we generally don't like too much of. I don't know what we could do about that.
Where are these?
Pardon?
Where are you talking about?
Right next to the pier, the existing pier, down where the stairs come down off the pier. You see the stairs there right at the edge of the salt marsh, and then there's a whole bunch of maybe 3-inch plastic pipes lined up in parallel, half embedded into the sand, which actually make a pretty good thing to haul a boat up onto, but it's kind of almost a structure. Certainly doesn't belong there on the beach, on the sand. That's all, not just sand, that's really, goes well into where all the marsh grass is.
We'll definitely look into that.
Right in there, right next to the,
Okay.
and I guess it ought to go. I mean,
Yeah, shouldn't have the boats on the salt marsh either, so.
well, it's sort of tough, because it really is a
Yeah,
pretty
it
good
is.
solution.
It is.
Unfortunately, it's just not something we generally permit, but it's better than dragging the boats up on the sand, which
Yeah,
might be the alternative.
there could be alternatives, actually.
But anyhow.
Raised.
Right, it shouldn't be there.
Got it.
That's all.
All right, thank you. I think everybody else has pretty much covered things. I will just say, for future reference, and mainly because it's a sort of universal theme for our hearings tonight, it's very helpful when there are trees that are going to be coming down, if the trees are marked. It's hard to keep in mind sometimes all the changes that.
You mean on the plan or in the field?
In the field, I'm sorry.
Both ways.
Well, both, yes, but you've done the plan. So it's not a big deal in your case here tonight, but in general, it's really helpful. And
These trees were easy to find.
yeah, right. Okay. So is there anything else from members of the board? Anything from the public? Yes, sir. Please come up and use the microphone and identify yourself.
Madam Chairman, members of the board, thank you. My name is David Bone. I live at 27 Nichols Road, directly across the street from Mr. Sherman's house. Let me begin by saying he's been a great neighbor. He built a quality home on that property, and we're very appreciative of what he did to improve the property. A couple of points. We are 8-year residents, seasonal residents of Falmouth. Bought the house in 2010. One of the things that attracted us to the house that we purchased at 27, directly across the street, was the view that we had. I requested a copy of the plan. I haven't had a chance, I received it, I haven't had a chance to look at it. So I don't understand how big the development, the additional square footage is and how many floors it is. It sounded like 2 stories, and I don't know what the dimensions of that are. But from my perspective, any view that I have in that direction from what I can see from the back of the room is gone across that piece of the property. And similarly to the right, more plantings along that strip, which I believe is where it belongs personally. It's kind of an empty strip. I think you ought to consider that. Well, I guess what I would ask you to consider as a deference to a neighbor is think about where you require that additional planting in that northeast corner of the property. What little view we will have left has the potential to be completely taken up by that. And I would ask that the commission consider that in its deliberations. As I said, he's been a great neighbor. I'm not here to oppose the project. He has a right to build what he has the right to build, and that's America. I'm all for it. I just ask for your consideration on the plantings along the strip. That public right easement, something we use all the time, and our grandchildren use that easement. It's something that is heavily used in the neighborhood. So if you consider the planting plan, the vision shelf off to the right, the northeast corner of the house as well, I'd appreciate it. And
All right. Thank you very much for your comments. And you can see the plan anytime at the conservation office, if you would like, and you can even take mine with you if you would like.
could I ask, I'm just curious, is this something that you will make a decision on tonight?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
I apologize. Did you make a decision tonight? Is this something you take under advisement?
We take it
and consider
under advisement.
At the next meeting?
We're going to get a continuance.
You have to do it next week.
Okay.
Next week?
No,
No,
we're gonna need a
actually,
continuance.
we'll probably need a continuance, so it won't close tonight.
Okay. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Anyone else? Matt?
I'd like to request a continuance so we could see how we can improve this mitigation layout.
That's great.
Matt, can you also check into that shed for me?
Yep.
Thank you. And if you have pictures of the gravel area, you know, that, just let me know, bring them in,
Sure.
email them to me, bring them to the hearing or something, and check into the irrigation system for me.
You know, I don't want
I know I
to,
tripped over an irrigation system today, I can't remember exactly which it was on. I didn't go to too many, so.
I don't know if I made it clear, but the trees in the A buffer, I'm with Betsy on that, so I like your plan too, but just not that.
You too?
Yes. I didn't know we had to.
Dominoes.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of us have been around a while.
Do you remember what the other term for the A buffer is? Does anybody
No
remember?
touch
No touch zone.
Well, that's why you have performance standards.
I know.
That is a performance.
That is a performance standard.
So, a date? Jen?
Yeah, that'd be helpful.
What do you think, Cory?
Is this being removed or left? And this is just a,
So, Matt, we don't meet on the
That's okay,
we have no
11th,
permit
visit
yet.
town
yeah,
meeting.
that's what I was trying to figure out. This is a separate system that just services that.
18th, Madam Chairman. Of April.
18th.
April 18th?
Yes.
At the request of the applicant, we'll continue this to April 18th.
Second.
Any other comments or questions? All those, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed,
That's
unanimous.
File.
So moved. Thank you,
Thank you, Matt.
All right. Next, we have THO of Massachusetts Incorporated, care of Fred Sorrento, 40, oh, excuse me. Yeah, okay. One's continued. 42 Fiddler's Cove Road, North Falmouth, Massachusetts, for permission to remove two 6,000-gallon underground marine fuel storage tanks and install one 12,000-gallon above-ground marine tank replace underground dock piping, piping sump, and the associated excavating, grading, and landscaping. Good evening.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Mark Smith. I'm a civil engineer with CMG Environmental, and I'm here with Fred Sorrento, who's the general manager over at Brewer. Is it okay to take the mic over to
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. Yeah, it's just used to pointing to the plan. So tell me if I'm standing in the wrong spot.
The table's in the wrong spot, unfortunately.
Okay, so there's an existing fuel dock over at the marina. It's way over on the extreme east side of the marina property. This is the overall marina property. I show on the little inset here where the tank is proposed to go, and then we blew that area up to 1 inch equals 10 feet. So we've got our floating docks out here. This most easternmost dock is the fuel dock. And they got a parking lot right here. You can see we have our mean high water line and where we calculated out the coastal bank. And under ocean, we also have shellfish. And we've got our land subject to coastal storm flowage. You can see on the plan dashed, they're a little bit light on the plan, but it shows the 2 6,000-gallon tanks to be removed. Those are underground tanks. It looks like sometime in the past they excavated a little bit and then kind of covered them up. So I mean, they're underground tanks, but they did some rework of the topography out there to get the tanks in some time ago. I think it was about 1988. So the plan here, our project, is to replace the aging underground tanks, which currently have 6,000 gallons of gasoline and 6,000 gallons of diesel, and install a single double-wall, fire-rated, above-ground tank that's split into 2 compartments, 6,000 for diesel, 6,000 for gasoline. So they'll still have the same product mix that they have currently. Currently, the piping runs underneath that parking lot and then goes underneath their current boardwalk along the top of the bank over to in front of their fuel shed where their fuel operation is. And then it transitions to under the dock piping, the overwater piping. So our plan is to put new piping across the parking lot, tie into the existing double-wall fiberglass pipe. The pipe under the dock is a good pipe. It's double-wall fiberglass, and it's perfectly good to remain. And then come past the fuel, and right before we get to that transition sump, we're going to disconnect that old piping, put in a new transition sump with proper breakaway valves and fittings and things like that, and run new lines out to the dispensers. Currently, there's single wall piping under the dock, and we're going to upgrade that to double wall. So basically, we're going to remove the existing underground tanks and then just fill in the hole. Of course, that's created, and that'll give us about a 3-to-1, in some places 2-to-1 slope down. And we have a flat area where we can install the new tank on a concrete pad. The tank will have continuous electronic monitoring, spill containment, overfill protection. It also will be needing a permit from the State Fire Marshal's office, so they'll review it as well. It's protected by bollards, and it's basically a state-of-the-art installation, and it's something that they're doing nationwide at these marinas. They consider the underground tanks to be a problem and a bit of a liability, and they feel a lot more comfortable with the above-ground tanks. So I will answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Jen, do you have any?
No, Madam Chairman. I've met with the Brewers Marina representative multiple times on this project, so I'm fine. All
Okay.
my questions.
Great. Mark, you want to start?
I have no comments.
No comment. Peter?
Are there any trees that have to be cut down?
No, actually, there aren't. I did go out and identify any tree bigger than 5.5 inches, and the ones up here, I'll have to work with the contractor. They're close, but we're not really changing the grade. So if we slide the tanks out down slope and then backfill, promptly, I think we can keep them all, even though some of them maybe aren't the best specimens, but I'd rather not take them down than take them down.
Okay, Steve?
No questions.
Jamie? Betsy?
Would be a big improvement.
Big
All right.
improvement. The only one question I did have, usually we need a PLS stamp on these.
Not just the professional engineer stamp, you need the license stamp, the surveyor stamp too?
Yeah, because the project is on the ground.
Yeah.
You have boundaries.
Yep, this is actually a brand-new survey by Green Seal,
Okay.
And I can
I
certainly...
mean, it's not huge, it's just,
Yeah.
that can be something you can just.
Yeah, we just
add.
updated it with topography, so I can get a stamp for that.
Great improvement, thank you.
No questions.
Kevin?
No.
All right. Anything from the public?
I'll make a motion to close the hearing and take it under advisement. Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, unanimous, so moved. Thank you very much.
Whenever you get the PLS stamp plan, just send it to us. That'd be great, and send it to electronic. Thank you.
Jen, there is time of year restriction.
Yeah.
All right, the
he's
other,
left-handed
Brewer Fiddler's Cove Marina has been continued, so now we
Betsy, let me see that.
hear Mark Forbes, 76 White Highway, East Falmouth, Massachusetts, for permission to construct a single-family, 4-bedroom house with garage underneath, install dry wells, utilities, paved driveway, Title V sewage disposal, and associated clearing, excavating, grading, and landscaping. Hello, Mike.
Betsy, this one goes in the dredging one.
Oh,
Yeah.
I was wondering why they were talking
Yeah,
about dredging.
yeah.
Yes, thanks. Where are we?
Thank you. McCoy Highway, 76 McCoy.
Good evening, Madam Chairman, members of the commission. Mike Porcelli, Falmouth Engineering, and I represent the applicant, Mark Forbes. Mr. and Mrs. Forbes are in the audience tonight. If there's any questions specifically for them, or they may want to comment. I do know one thing before I proceed. At least one of you had difficulty getting to the site. I too had difficulty when I first got retained to find the site, so we tried to put the signage and things, and give the directions in a way that would make it easy, but it's a tough spot.
The sign right up on 28 would have been helpful. I'm not certain you're allowed to do that in this circumstance,
Yeah.
but that's what I missed.
Yeah, we did put, if you get to Whistler's Way, you went too far. So.
Yeah, that was a.
That was helpful.
So you didn't go all the way to Mashpee at least, so, sorry, I hope you were able to find it.
Yes.
So, the Forbeses have applied for permission to build a single-family dwelling on the lot, Lot 2. Lot 2 has frontage on Childs River, so the wetland resources include the river. Land subject to title action. There is a coastal bank, and it's shown here in a green color. The top of it is in this location, and it coincides with two other important boundaries. The flood hazard zone A10 boundary. That's also the location of the boundary of the ACEC, Area of Critical Environmental Concern. So from here towards the river is ACEC in coastal bank and flood zone. From here back is two things. It's a buffer to the top of the coastal bank, and associated with the top of the coastal bank is the 50-foot no disturbance zone boundary, no disturbance zone A, and then 50 feet landward of that is the 50-foot outer buffer zone B to the top of the coastal bank. So the two add up to 100 feet. So the project is actually in excess of 100 feet from the top of the coastal bank. The closest point from the top of the bank to the limit of work is 115 feet. So this really isn't even in a buffer to a wetland resource. It is, of course, also subject to the Rivers Act because Childs River is considered a river. And riverfront has associated with it two important boundaries. It has a 100-foot inner riparian zone, and then adjacent to, and the next 100 feet landward is a 100-foot outer riparian zone. And the Forbeses have applied to you because there is jurisdiction, because we're asking permission to have some marginal intrusion into the outer riparian zone. And that area of intrusion will require alteration of a portion of the outer riparian zone to allow for the construction of the home and some clearing around the house to provide a very modest yard. Landward of that, an outside jurisdiction, is the driveway and the Title V septic system. Even further landward of that, and an important thing to make note of, is the driveway which runs, and you found this out today, eventually. You come off of Wacoit Highway in a very unassuming location that you now know where it is, and turn in, and then you run parallel to Wacoit Highway. So it's a common driveway that leads to a few houses that are buffered from Wacoit Highway, and there's obvious reasons to be buffered from Wacoit Highway. It's the traffic, you can see it, and you can hear it. So the Forbeses are aware of that, obviously, and we're trying to take some steps that would allow them to try to get as far as we think is practicable from the noise of the highway and try to get closer to a little bit more serene portion of the lot. I mean, it's amazing if you stand here as compared to if you walk through and find your way down to the river bank, the difference. You wouldn't even know you're on the same lot for a whole bunch of reasons, noise being one of them. So the Forbeses are trying to create a situation where they try to get closer to the preferred part of the lot but at the same time trying to balance it against protecting environmental interests. So the plan is, if you were to approve this, would be allow them to alter a portion of the outer riparian zone. And in this case, it's 2,100 square feet. And it's crosshatched on this plan and on the plans that you have. And it basically goes from the edge of clearing to the boundary of the outer riparian zone. If they're allowed to do that, it also allows them an opportunity to do landscaping between the house and the driveway, try to buffer the sound more and the visible, the view of the traffic on Wacoit Highway, and try to give them sort of a little bit of a protection from those elements. So in this case, the regulation that really applies is 310 CMR 10.58, which is the riverfront. In the notice of intent application, we went through the applicable performance standards, and we did a alternatives analysis, however brief it is. And basically, if you read the appropriate sections of 10.58, there's a provision that recognizes that the commission can allow an alteration within the outer buffer zone, and it basically allows you to alter up to 10% of the riverfront area or 5,000 square feet, whichever is greater. So in this case, the riverfront area is 22,000 plus or minus square feet. 10% of that would be about 2,200 square feet, which is less than 5,000. So technically, if the board thought that the project didn't have any impacts to wetland resources, you could allow up to 5,000 square feet, but we chose not to try to ask for that. We chose to ask for what we thought was a reasonable compromise, and in this case, we're only asking for 2,100 square feet of alteration. The narrative within the notice of intent speaks to interest to protect, including private and public water supply, groundwater protection, stormwater damage, prevention of flood control, protection to land-containing shellfish, wildlife, protection of wildlife habitat, protection of fisheries. Now, I know you may say, well, what's the difference if you push it slightly out or slightly in? Well, to the Forbes, it's a big difference. And I would say that sort of the opposite, the other side of that argument is what really is the difference as it relates to true impacts to the wetland resources that are, in this case, significantly far away from where we're proposing to do the alteration. As I said, the top of the bank is 115 feet, and even further than that, by about another 50 feet, is the edge of the river. So we think that this is reasonable, and we think that it is approvable, and it meets the performance standards found at 10.58. We're hoping you'll see it that way as well. And I'm here to answer questions, and the Forbes is here as well to answer questions.
Thank you, Mike. Jen?
Yes, Madam Chairman, a couple of things. Mike, there are patches of salt marsh along the edge of that, so those will need to be surveyed and put on the plan so the resource area delineation is correct.
Where are they?
Mark said he identified them along Childs River, so you may have to go back out and just look at those, just so we put them on a plan if they're out there. Okay?
I'm sorry, could you repeat what you
Oh,
just said?
salt marsh.
Path, did you say?
Salt marsh.
Oh, they saw salt marsh, okay.
Yeah.
I guess there's a
There were
patch.
patches. Sorry, Steve, I was looking down. Patches of salt marsh.
Patches, okay, I
Yeah,
thought you said
patches.
path. Okay, thank you.
I know I met with you, Mike. You know my concerns about the riverfront area. There are a couple of little things that concern me about this plan. One is the location of the septic. You're kind of boxing yourself in there. So I know that when we met with your client, it was like phase 1, phase 2, and in your narrative you said that you wanted to clear within the riverfront area to allow for a lawn and, well, you said moistest addition, but I'm assuming you meant modest addition.
Hope it's not moist.
Yeah, I was just like, and
See,
so
that's
the
a word, so
location,
spell check
so
didn't catch you.
the
Yeah, right.
location of the septic is concerning me because you're almost taking all that potential land that you could put your addition on and making it unusable because you're putting your septic right in a really, like right in the middle. So I'd like you to look at relocating that septic because I'm going to recommend the board to have the house moved out of the riverfront area. You know how I feel about that. I understand you went through the alternatives analysis, but I don't think it met the threshold of the evaluation. You say that no other locations on the property provide sufficient distance, but sufficient distance is subjective. So, if the board does require you to remain outside the riverfront area, you may want to just look at relocating that septic. It just seems like it's in an odd space to me on the lot. I know it's outside of our jurisdiction, it's just a comment. And then second, that the riverfront area has a 200-foot buffer because it is deemed by the Department of Environmental Protection to be a sensitive resource. And there's a reason why, if their lots are sufficient, that the performance standards say they should be sited basically outside that buffer. So those are my only comments.
Madam Chairman, can I just comment on that before I forget?
Yes.
So, I understand Jen's comments, and the regulations also recognize that you can use judgment and make a determination if the, recognizing that a river can be a sensitive resource, you can also make a judgment as to whether or not the alteration within the riverfront area will have an impact on the wetland resources, as outlined in the regs and in the narrative of the notice of intent. So I just want to reiterate that we don't know that there would be any measurable difference in change or impact to the wetland resources whether we shifted this, what amounts to about 30 feet back from its position than its current position. Just wanted to
I appreciate that. We also, tend to try to uphold the performance standards where it's feasible.
Right, but the other thing I wanted to say, just to finish that thought, is that there are other projects that we looked to when we were trying to make a decision on how we were going to approach this. In fact, there's another project at 42 River's Edge where it was a similar situation, but there was a significantly larger area of alteration in the riverfront area that the commission saw fit to allow to proceed, and that there are others. So we looked at those other projects sort of as a guide for us to make a decision on how we should proceed.
Yeah, if I recall correctly, the topography presented an issue in that other case. But in any case, I think you'll be hearing from several people up here about this.
I just want to reiterate, Madam Chairman, it says the applicant shall demonstrate that there's no practicable or substantially equivalent economic alternative to the project.
Yes.
And in this case, there clearly is.
Yes. Okay. Betsy, would you like to start this off?
Sure, I'll start. And I'll start by talking about buffers. And if we had our wish, we would like to have buffers at least 600 feet to protect our wetland resources. The state, this is our only 200-foot buffer resource for the state because of the importance of these rivers. This is a river that the town is putting a lot of money into for restoration. And so I don't think there should be any disturbance within 200 feet. And so that's all I have to say.
All right. Maury?
I did ask Mike about no trees on the plan, because there are a lot of trees there. But, and it's expensive, I know, to site them all, but I think the substantial trees on that site could be cited. The big oaks and the big pines, not all the little teeny stuff. I agree with Betsy. I live 20 feet off a road, off of Old Dock Road, so I know what noise is, and I commiserate with you. It gets old after a while. But with good screening, I mean, luckily you already have some on Wacoit Highway. There's plenty of area that you can screen up toward the state highway if you did move the house back. And being a septic installer, I would really think about where you're putting that septic, even though it's out of our jurisdiction, because if you do move that back, and this is a very modest house for what we usually see. It's really nice to see a modest house. But that will really cripple you if you ever want to put an addition on over the years, or put a two-car, do something. That will be a problem where it's set, because it really kind of doesn't allow you to do much there once it's put in. And there is a dead cedar on the bank that's blown over, so if it's missing, it is blown over, laying in the ground, a good-sized one on the coastal bank. And other than that, what's the first floor elevation of the house? It's a drive-under garage?
Garage under.
Well, it's a garage under, meaning the living space is above it. The grade of the garage is elevation 16, so that lower level is at grade at 16. So you park on, you don't excavate to get into it. You
Right, you
drive
gotta just
in.
drive right in, yeah.
Yeah, and then the living space would be above it, 1 story above it. So if it's 16, the living space would
another
be
8
like
feet.
24.
Okay.
And the
Just roughly.
ground is
Okay,
14.
okay, thank you.
Courtney?
I guess I'll join Betsy and Maury and with the sentiment that I don't see a reason why this can't be moved 15 feet or whatever it takes to get it outside of this 200-foot buffer. There's something in the narrative about the decibel levels off of Walcoit, Route 28, and I agree that's a busy road. But the proposed house, the front of the proposed house is 192 feet away. So if you move the house, whatever it looks, I'm scaling it 15, 20 feet nearer the road, outside of the 200-foot offset. Have you done a study on the relative increase in decibel levels caused by if you located the house? In other words, do you have evidence to suggest that by moving this 15 feet closer to the road, that this is going to create a much more high decibel count to the discomfort of the people living in there?
No.
So you're simply hypothesizing this.
Yeah.
So we can hypothesize to the contrary.
Yes, you can.
All right. No other comments?
Kevin?
On the one hand, it's a shame we're debating about 20 feet on a parcel of land that certainly 20 feet doesn't seem to matter one way or the other. That said, I just can't see that it would be that much of a hardship to move the house 20 feet, especially, it's heavily wooded area to begin with, and I would think that there might be opportunities to increase the buffer to the roadway. Whether it makes a difference of 1 or 10 decibels, I couldn't tell you. It would probably matter whether it was a clear night in the winter or not, but, yeah. If this is such an issue and we can solve it, or not solve it, but adhere to the regs for a minor, what would appear to most people to be a minor adjustment. I can't say it.
Okay, thank you. Jamie?
They should just petition the state to move the road. You don't have any AC pads, generator, anything drawn, so I would assume those are all going to be out of jurisdiction anyway. Can we assume that?
Yes, you can.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Steve?
Thank you.
It's been well discussed. Thank you.
Mark?
That's all right.
Well,
I'm going to jump in.
Oh,
It's interesting when, as a relatively new conservation member, I try to understand the regulations and then look at the sites and then think about why you would do this when you knew the site as well and the regulations. And I read the narrative pretty carefully this time. And then I went out and I looked at the site and I visually moved everything back with the limit of the manicured area, whatever that will be, in front of the house. This, I thought, was a prudent place to site the property, to site the house, and also the relative size compared to some of the things that we've been seeing lately, which were maybe 3 times as big as this in many cases. What happened to the front of this site? Do you have any idea what the history was?
That's Phil.
Was it used to be part of another property that they separated, or?
This
Why did
property was subdivided in 1969 into 3 lots. It was a large property. It was also subdivided again in 1988 into 6 lots.
Oh,
So
thank you.
There's a history of subdividing these lots, which does play into the riverfront analysis.
I'm sure it does, as I would suspect. So I was listening to the comments about where you put the septic systems, but where the house is, I had a hard time moving it back. So I understand what the regulations are, and I'm compelled to comply with the regulations, but I thought you did a pretty good job putting it back here. And if I could mention while I'm here, I happened to run into Mr. Burchill when I was at the site and pulled on to a piece of his lawn while I was trying to avoid colliding with him. And so I apologize, as I did when it happened. But I'd like to also apologize to Mr. Burchill, who seemed very supportive of the house and the project. So that's all I have.
Thank you. And Mark?
Yeah, this is a tough one. As all you know, looked at that property and walked down to the river, that's a very gentle slope down to the river. It's not like anything that's going on where the house was proposed or in that region is going to have any water flow impact on the river. Wildlife maybe, but it's certainly not going to lead to water sluicing down across the property and getting into the river. You look at the house next to it, to the south of it, it's about 120 feet from the water. It's quite up on the river. For whatever reason. It got built there much before this one did, obviously, probably before the regs. So on that point, I aside from the letter of the regs, I don't see any reason why the house couldn't be there where it's proposed. I don't think that has any impact on, other than, quote, the paper says 200 feet. That's, and that's, of course, what it says. And on the other side, I don't see any reason, as has been brought up, that there's no, I don't see any audible reason why you couldn't move the house farther back. I mean, it's, right now, of course, there's nothing, no understory, nothing between that and the road, so it really is loud. I agree, it's uncomfortable. I would hope that you'd put a lot of, maybe arborvitae, some sort of dense, low greens in there to break up the sound. And you could probably do that just as well if it were 20 feet farther from the water or not. So it's kind of a tough one. I didn't quite see what you saw, Steve, as far as it being the best place on the lot to put it. I mean, I didn't look for that particularly, so I guess that's all I have to say. It's tough.
I'll just add, my inclination is that we should try to satisfy the regulations as they're written if we can. One possibility that might be to try to rotate the house, but I just also make the point, it's not inexpensive probably, but it wouldn't take a very high stone wall, I think, to deflect most of a lot of the tire noise from Route 28. So, anything else? Anything from the public? Certainly. Well, let us, can we decide, would you like us to put a motion on the table?
Well, I guess there's 3 choices. I can just not continue it and let you deliberate and render a decision at a future hearing. I can continue it and consider what you've said. Or I guess I could, and then withdraw, because if we contemplate what you said and adjust the house location and push it back, we're effectively outside your jurisdiction. I believe I'm going to ask for a continuance so I can not have to make the decision on the fly here at the podium. So I'd like to make a request for a continuance.
Okay. 1 minute.
Okay, I'm just saying, before we make a vote, I want to...
Right. Well, there are other comments coming. Do you have a date to suggest?
I do.
I can make it easy. The 25th is my next available date.
Okay, that helps a lot, I'm sure.
April 25th?
Hang on. Now I know why. Be the Falmouth Engineering Night. I'm gonna say no on that one, Mike, because I don't know what's coming in for regular notices, and the two that you have on for the 25th are gonna be brand new notices, so,
I mean, the options from my request for continuance are pretty limited. I mean, if
Yeah.
I pull it out of jurisdiction, I'll probably end up withdrawing. Otherwise, I'm gonna probably say we chose not to and let you probably vote a denial and give us our opportunities on appeal.
Yeah, it
There's
seems
not a
to
lot
me
of
that-
heavy lifting at the next hearing.
Exactly, I was just gonna say, I think it probably wouldn't take much time.
okay, that's fine.
Is
You
it-
guys don't
I
know
mean-
what's on the 25th, but sure, let's go.
I suspect I'll be back then and say we considered your comments and we decided not to make changes.
I would really look at that septic, because I said,
Yeah.
I'm with Maura, you're boxing yourself in, and that's one of the big concerns I have about the plan is, it's almost, and like I said, when I met with your clients, you know, this was a phase one for them, and it's almost like, you know, you're gonna come back and say, well, the septic's right there, we have no other choice but to do phase two laterally, and that would further encroach into that riverfront. So that's one of the big concerns I have with citing that septic. You're just boxing yourself in and almost making that entire lot unusable in the future.
Sure, I understand that.
Jen, is there any real problem with the 25th?
Well, we have Chase Road and T-Ticket, which were both continued to that, so along with new notices that we'll be taking for that evening, you're gonna have two notices that you haven't heard yet, so you're at a minimum looking at 6 notices in one night, and a couple of them, I mean, at least.
6 new ones?
Yeah.
Because we haven't heard you.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. But I mean, if it's, you know, either withdraw or, you know, move it outside of our jurisdiction and withdraw. And Mike, if you do that, it's like, that you're gonna have to remember to hold that 200-foot line. So the foundation can't be on it, so the clients are gonna want like yard or anything outdoor living space, it has to be beyond that 200. Okay.
Sure.
So I mean, you know, it probably is not gonna make that much of a difference.
Yeah, I just don't see this taking up a lot of our
Okay,
time.
that's fine, totally fine.
All right, so a motion, please.
Motion to continue to April 25th?
Second.
All right, so are there any questions or comments from the public?
I think if we're gonna continue on this.
All right, anything else? All those in favor?
No, I-
Oh, I'm sorry, Betsy. I'm sorry. Go right ahead.
You know what? Does it need to be quiet for that long?
I have a sense what it does, from what it does to me, but anyway, please go ahead.
Well, I can't. I want to ask Mike a question.
I guess could I just make a?
But I have the floor now.
Yeah.
You can do it after.
The answer is yes, in just a minute, or a few minutes.
With Betsy.
Mike, I just want to suggest, in a beautiful spot like that, I'm gonna emphasize your point to suggest, definitely, obviously, I'm gonna suggest we move it back. But have it parallel to the river, have the house parallel to the river, it takes as much advantage.
Understood. Put a big mansion 205 feet out. I'm only kidding.
And also, I had it in mind to say this earlier, and I just do want to make the point that I really appreciate the size of the dwelling. It's, it is appreciated. And please come up and address us.
Hi, I'm Mark Forbes, my wife Cindy. Thank you for hearing our project. I guess I just want to say, you know, moving it back from the road was, I guess, probably our major concern, just to try to get that modest amount of space back from the road. And going back and forth with Mike, we did take a lot of consideration into trying to minimize how much we did infringe on that 200, on that outer riparian zone. So I just wanted to let you guys know that. We didn't just sort of go into it willy-nilly, you know, we put a lot of thought into it, and we do like that spot on the lot, so if you could just take it into consideration, we'd appreciate it, and again, we appreciate your time.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you. So, now, we're ready to vote. All those in favor of continuing to April 25, say aye.
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 Opposed? Unanimous. So moved. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, next we have Neil and Betty Watanabe, 8 Bridge Street, East Falmouth, Massachusetts, for permission to raise RAZE, the existing dwelling, and construct a 5-bedroom, single-family house with attached garage, porches with stairs, install a new Title V sewage disposal system, dry wells, gravel driveway, utilities, native mitigation planting, and associated clearing, excavating, grading, and landscaping.
Madam Chairman, again, Michael Borselli, Falmouth Engineering. I represent the applicant, along with Teresa Sprague from Flax Design, who's here tonight. She prepared a comprehensive land management plan, as well as a landscape and mitigation planting plan. The house was designed by Denise Benoli, the architect, who's also here this evening, and we're also joined by the builder for the project, Ralph Cataldo. This property is located at 8 Bridge Street. It has frontage on, water frontage on Green Pond. It's on the western shore of Green Pond. There's an existing licensed dock on the property. There's an existing single-family dwelling that is in the same location as the proposed dwelling. Its driveway, septic system, typical cleared and landscaped areas that you'd find in a home in this area. The wetland resources of note include salt marsh. I guess I should start with the land under the ocean, and land subject to tidal action. There's a strip of salt marsh. There's a coastal bank, and a portion of the property is in land subject to coastal storm flowage. I should say, I believe, effectively the entire lot is in land subject to coastal storm flowage, but there is a boundary of velocity zone from here, Seawood, and from here, Landwood is AE12, base flood elevation 12. We also show the 25-foot in parallel to the FEMA V zone, the Falmouth designated V zone. We located the trees on the lot, driveway. We submitted also with your package reduced copies of plans to try to make it easier to do a compare and contrast to the impervious surface calcs, pre and post. There is a summary of the notes outlining that on the plan. So the house that we're proposing is sited in a location it's certainly a bigger house, but it's oriented and in the same general location as the existing house. It has an attached 2-car garage and a proposed driveway with turnaround between the house and the street. I've shown the associated no disturbance zone A, and outer buffer zone B for the resource areas of note, including the 100-foot no disturbance zone from the salt marsh, the 50-foot and 50-foot no disturbance zone, and 50-foot outer from the top of the coastal bank. The house has been designed very specifically with FWR 10.18 in mind. I guess since 2008, when the rules took effect, we've probably done dozens of projects like this, so I think we've all worked together on that, and we understand what they mean and what they say and why they're good. The goal is to enhance buffers to wetland resources when they were altered prior to a prohibition against doing that, and if you make things bigger, you need to provide more mitigation planting at certain ratios that we all know, 3-to-1 and 2-to-1. So with that all in mind, we very meticulously designed the house. We kind of worked backwards, if you will. We surveyed it, we understood the areas that were available for planting, and it sort of backed us into the size of the house that could be supported on this lot and, in our opinion, meet your regulations. So what you see is the culmination of that design work by Denise Spinoli and I, and interfacing with Teresa to provide the enhanced buffer mitigation that is required. So the areas between the house and the wetland resources are shown to have the required mitigation planting. If you look at the reduced copies and follow along in the notes, the net result of all of it is there were increases in the calculated ratios are shown, so that the required mitigation for this project was 2,250 square feet of mitigation, and we're proposing 2,310, or I guess that's 60 square feet in excess of the minimum requirement. In all of the plant material and the specifications and the details associated with it are on the plan prepared by Blue Flax Design. In addition, there's a written narrative land management plan. There's a proposal for a vista window, and the delineation of that is on the Blue Flax Design plan, and how that vista window will be managed. We tried our best to site everything as far away from the wetland resources as possible. We have no mitigation planting closer than 10 feet to the house. There's a limit of work that demonstrates that, and there's specific setback distances to the mitigation planting. There are no proposed trees to be removed in, believe it or not, in the A of E zone. There are some trees to be removed landward of that in the area of the proposed garage, but none in the 100-foot buffer from the wetland resources. And of course, we're proposing dry wells to contain roof runoff. I think that sums up the project overview, and the specifics of the mitigation planting and the land management plan that you have can be reviewed and described to you by Teresa, and I'll turn it over to Teresa.
Okay, thanks, Mike. That was certainly a comprehensive review of the relevant regs. So. Teresa.
I'm going to start with this picture, Teresa Sprague, Blue Flax Design. I think Mike did a pretty good job explaining this site from a vegetation perspective. The property is outside of the house area, the driveway And along the edge of the shoreline, the property is densely wooded with mature oak and pitch pine trees in the overstory. Wooded areas around the lawn have an established native ground cover layer, but there's a mid-layer shrub canopy is lacking throughout a lot of those areas. There are numerous sapling trees, and I'm talking less than or just barely equal to 3 inches DBH that have been historically cut by a previous property owner and are poorly formed due to those non-best management practices. Those trees are either unlikely to grow to full canopy size or much more susceptible to pest and disease. And I wanted to start with this photo. I did speak with Jennifer earlier today. I wanted to start with this photo to share. And the bottom photo, please excuse our scribbles. It's what we were kind of using in-house as we were working, but I thought it would be helpful for you to see as the questions came up. Mike discussed the fact that there's no removal of trees within the area, and I just wanted to clarify that we are not proposing to remove any canopy-sized trees, but we are, however, proposing to remove these that I think we could barely even call oak shrubs at this point. They've been severely pruned to a height of about 3 or 4 feet tall. They never have an opportunity to grow into mature canopy-sized trees, with the exception of this one here, which we've identified can be pruned and allowed to grow back to a mature canopy-sized tree, which is what this little scribble tree outline is, as we were talking about it in the office. We've also identified some non-native Japanese black pine that we would propose to remove here. However, we can certainly discuss that. So I just wanted to point that out because I wanted to clarify when Mike said there are no trees to be removed, that we are indeed proposing to remove some oaks. However, we are not proposing to remove any of these canopy-sized trees in here. This existing lawn area, this is just a panoramic shot, but gives you an idea of what we're proposing to plant as part of the mitigation, which I'll get into here, which is outlined in this pinkish color on the plan here. So with that, and we've provided some photographs of the area and of the cutting that was done, so some up-close photographs of the cutting that was done on page 4 of our land management plan. But basically, as Mike pointed out, we're looking at a total of 2,310 square feet of mitigation, of which 1,950 square feet will be planted in the existing lawn area that's shown in the purple color on our plan. In addition to that, we're proposing 360 square feet of vegetation in some bare areas of the salt marsh, and I can pass around the photograph so you can see the area that we're proposing to plant.
We're going to have to keep that.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. I can also provide these additional photos for you as well for the record. Basically, we're looking at planting that vegetation 3 to 1, and then the damaged vegetation, which are those oak trees that we were proposing to cut, we'll be replacing those at 2 to 1. So we'll be replacing 2 shrubs for every one of those 1 trees that were going to be removed within that 25-foot wide view corridor. We're proposing to begin the project by removing those damaged trees, again, less than 3-inch diameter breast height, and as well as that non-native Japanese black pine that was circled in that picture. Removal of the damaged vegetation will be followed by selective basal bark injection herbicide pretreatment. We have identified some invasive bittersweet shrub honeysuckle and multiflora rose on the site. I'll pass this picture around as well, and you can see it on the story area that's shaded in yellow. So what we're calling out that area shaded in yellow as a restoration area, where we'd be removing some of the invasive vines and shrubs in that area. We would be managing a little bit of greenbrier and a little bit of poison ivy, again, not with the intention of entirely removing those plant species, but just getting them under control so that new plant species that are planted in there would not be overcome by those aggressive native plant species. That area totals 2,479 square feet. Once we thin out those invasive shrubs, any bare soils would be seeded with a custom native cool and warm season grasses mix. And that area would be then restored with a mix of arrowwood, viburnum, bayberry, and that's not even I just lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. Arrowwood, viburnum, bayberry, inkberry, holly, sheep laurel, black huckleberry, and then we'll be planting groundsel bush along the edge of the salt marsh. In addition to that, we're proposing 2 understory trees, Amelanchier canadensis. Because this lot is so well canopied, there is not a lot of room for additional full canopy-sized trees, but the lot would certainly benefit from some understory trees as well as those understory shrubs. In the area that we're showing in purple, where again we have a lot of this, we've got that full oak canopy. What we'd really like to do is bring it back to the native understory that's found throughout the rest of the areas that hadn't been disturbed and sort of transformed into lawn. So we'd be planting that with black huckleberry, New Jersey tea, again, bayberry, sheep laurel, winterberry holly, inkberry holly, and some sweet fern, which I understand is not a favorite of some people on the commission.
Oh, you got a few of them,
Or at least our staff.
I do want to talk about the fact of why we're proposing that. And we're only proposing that mainly within that 25-foot wide view corridor. And the whole reason for proposing that is exactly the picture that we're showing to you, that somebody has been cutting those trees in order to maintain a view in the past. Not this property owner, previous property owner, but that area has been regularly cut. So in thinking long-term and planning out how this view corridor is going to be managed in the future, we're proposing to put in plants within that 25-foot wide strip that are not going to require anyone to come in and cut in the future in order to maintain that view corridor area. So I think, considering the size of the lot, and the size of the view corridor, that in that 25-foot wide area, while we don't want it to look like a missing tooth, we want to plant it in such a way so that people are not going to feel compelled in the future to go in there and continue to cut and ending up with trees that look like this or shrubs that look like this and potentially ending up with an enforcement issue. So whether or not the property owner comes back to the commission and gets permission to prune in the future, we'd still have something looking like this. Whereas if we plant it thoughtfully for long-term management, I think we can avoid anybody having to do any continual disturbance in that 50-foot buffer. And I know that the point was made earlier in an earlier hearing that 50-foot area is considered a no-touch zone, and I know in other towns we often call it the no-disturbance zone. And in this case, we do have the benefit of an entirely vegetated 50-foot buffer. I do understand that the A zone extends a little bit further due to the 100-foot buffer to the salt marsh that's required under Falmouth wetland regs, but we do have a fully vegetated 50-foot no-disturb zone, which we'd like to maintain as a no-disturb zone, meaning nobody's going to have to continuously cut in order to maintain that view corridor. So I think with that, I'm happy to answer any questions about what we're proposing as far as mitigation.
All right, thank you, Teresa. Jen?
Yeah. Mike, I want to go over a few things with you before I have some comments for Teresa.
Sure.
Okay. I went out to the site today, and I know Mark and Brendan visited the site last week. I think we're going to need to meet out there because I think there's some, we want to go over the delineation of the coastal bank with you, and also the salt marsh and the possibility of, or the presence of a BVW. So could you just tell me how you determine the salt marsh line?
We actually did it by observation and by elevation.
Elevation, so the spring high tide.
Yeah.
So you're using that spring high tide line. Okay, so although you use the spring high tide because it's a regulatory definition of a salt marsh, there are wetland plants landward of that. So you need to kind of call that out as a BVW then if we're not going to call it salt marsh. So that's kind of what I want to go on site and just kind of talk to you about.
I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, and also the top of the coastal bank I think is of concern to the staff. The other thing is the staking. I need the view corridor staked out. So, I mean, obviously, I can kind of determine where it is, but I'd really like the view corridor staked out so it's clear in the field. And also, the staking of the limit of work, although the plan shows the limit of work is landward of all the trees in the field, it's not that clear. It looks like it's running like behind one of the trees and through one of the trees, so we just want to kind of go over that with you. Okay?
Sure, I'm happy to do
Yeah,
that.
yeah, we can do that.
Mhm.
And I already told you that portions of the north, the bank on the northern side is eroding, so that's kind of the things I want to talk to you on site about.
Okay, I'm happy to do that.
And that's great, as long as your continuance is not to the 25th, because you're not going to get the 25th again, so think about it.
We'll have to be
Yeah.
after that.
And just for your mitigation calculation, I don't know if you want to address this or Teresa wants to address this, is that you are going to have to show a radius around those trees, because there are a number of trees in your mitigation area that I don't think the spacing has been accounted for the required square footage. I think that's all I have for you, Mike. Teresa?
Yes.
You and I had a very brief conversation on the plan.
And I
so-
apologize because I didn't have the plan in front of me when we spoke. I was driving, so when I got back to my office.
No, that's fine. No, I understand.
I just felt
That's
like I
fine.
wasn't able to fully answer your questions.
I do a lot of work in the car while I'm driving to different sites, so I understand that.
Okay.
Not a fan of Sweet Fern, not a fan of the New Jersey Tea. And although I understand what you're saying about managing it, I don't think bringing in a mitigation plan and a restoration plan to this board with the comments that, well, if we put anything else, you're just asking for an enforcement order in the future, that's gonna have to find a different way to phrase what you're saying.
Well, I was just kind of, you know.
No, I understand what you're,
Just
yeah.
what we discussed
Yeah.
earlier today. So I was just trying to put the point across that we don't want the commission to have to, you know, hit somebody with an enforcement order for cutting. And frankly, we don't want anybody to cut in there at all, period.
No,
Yes.
no, we don't. So I have a question. In your yellow area, again, what is the percentage of invasives that you feel that you're going to need to remove?
It's very low percentage of invasives. I passed around the invasive
Yep,
species.
oh, I've been on the site.
Yeah, they mainly are found in this area, and you can see that there's more disturbance in this area because dumping has been done. But again, I just want to point out that the area shaded in yellow has absolutely nothing to do with the mitigation.
No, I understand.
Okay, this is
The
work
area
that we're
shaded in
recommending.
yellow, I'm looking at your restoration management area seeded with a shade grass and wildflower mix. And if you don't have that many percentage of invasives in there, how is your wildflower mix gonna take in there with the
Well,
existing shrub layer?
So we can certainly, that, and again, that's definitely can be represented differently, and graphically, we can represent that differently. Basically, what we'll be doing is seeding areas where we're removing large shrub honeysuckle shrubs, which I passed a photograph around.
Okay.
So I think the whole idea of that is just to point out to you that this is separate from the mitigation area. The area shaded in yellow is above and beyond the mitigation, that the property owner is willing to go in, remove the invasive species, and plant some understory shrubs in that area where none currently exist. So the idea is not that there'll be any other disturbance in that area except for the removal of the invasive plant species and then the restoration, and we're showing shrubs just throughout the area, because as we pointed out, there's very minimal understory layer in there right now. There's some greenbrier, there are some invasive shrubs, but other than that, there's no mid-story layer. So the whole idea of that to be yellow, frankly, it's less of a graphic misrepresentation than a label on the legend.
So what plant is going in there? That's what I couldn't figure out.
Yeah, Arrowwood viburnum, and I gave your feedback to the CAD person. The Arrowwood viburnum is going in there, bayberry is going in there. So it's mainly bayberry, Arrowwood viburnum, some winterberry holly, Ilex verticillata is going in there. So those are all larger understory shrubs that will tolerate the amount of shade that's under that oak canopy right now.
Okay, that's not what your legend says.
No.
There's,
At all.
and what I think happened here is I think 2 shrubs were given a similar legend. So we
Okay.
have the
Yes.
background.
Can you have her redo that legend, because it's kind of hard to even evaluate?
Yep, I
Because
will.
I don't know what I'm looking at.
Yes. Yep, I will have her redo that legend, so that's not a problem.
Can you reorient the X's and the
Yeah, that's,
T's too? Because that took me a while. I thought
Yeah.
these were all
We thought it
gonna
would be
be
removed.
things that were removed.
Reorient X's, oh, in the
Yeah.
shrubs.
No, your
Maybe not even use
viburnum-
X's.
My viburnum looks like it has a little X in it.
Yeah.
X's mean gone,
But
so.
down here it has a T.
Well, it has a plus, which is
Yeah.
typical landscape architectural graphic symbol for a shrub, versus an X, which is removal of a tree. So I think, and that's,
But I saw all those X's and I wasn't happy when I got out there.
Right.
oh, no, there are no canopy trees being removed from this site. Those are all pluses, and again, that's typical architectural graphic standards for a landscape shrub has a plus in it.
okay.
So, but we can change that so that it's.
Yeah, because I really
Yeah,
have no idea what
That
I'm
was
looking
sort of
at.
alarming.
I'm looking at, I'm looking at
I figured it out.
your quantities of your plant schedule here, and I've got 166 black huckleberry in 1-gallon containers, and I know Maury's gonna go, that's pretty much a twig.
Well,
What comes out.
right, and that's where I wanted to also speak to the comment about the oaks and the spacing. So if you were to look to the left or the right, to the north or the south from that pathway, you'll see there's a significant black huckleberry ground cover layer in that area, growing right up to the edge of the oak trees, which is how black huckleberry grows in a naturalized area. So in this case, what we're saying is we do have some larger shrubs in the area, but we'd like to get that low ground cover layer covered with black huckleberry, similar to what's existing in the area shaded with yellow. And that would be an area that's allowed to completely naturalize, as it would in any naturalized area where we have an oak, pitch pine plant community with a black huckleberry understory. So the purple is really representing a
I
significant.
don't know how to say this, but look at your planting plan and modify this.
So, and I just want to be clear on how you want us to modify it, because what we're going out to the site is taking cues from the surrounding area that has not been mown into lawn and restoring it with
Where is
similar
Sweet Fern
species.
and New Jersey tea in that area?
Anywhere.
The sweet fern is not on the site.
How
That
about
is
New
absolutely
New Jersey
true.
tea isn't either.
No, there's no New Jersey tea.
No?
The black, I thought you were talking about the black huckleberry.
No.
No, New Jersey tea is, again, it's a lower growing shrub. It's definitely found in a wooded area similar to this. It has high wildlife habitat value. Well, I see disagreement, but we see it. So, and the same thing with Angusta calmifolia. So this is a highly acidic soil.
Oh, I know a black huckleberry, I know that,
Yeah.
that's
So-
native
Yeah.
shrub, that's fine. But
And,
I
and black
did-
huckleberry
The
and.
New Jersey tea, the pollinator plant.
Yep, it is.
Yeah, it is.
We get the little rabbits in the back, yep.
Please don't say
Well,
rabbit. Not you, yeah, not you.
Well, I just want to understand before we go through this, that what are the goals here? So the goals are to provide 2,310 square feet of planting, to provide a completely naturalized native plant community that would not be disturbed in the future, that's allowed to completely naturalize. So if that is a matter of putting in larger shrubs within that view corridor that someone will have to come back and propose to prune in the future, we're happy to do that. I'm just trying to be forward-thinking in the plan. We can certainly remove the sweet fern and replace it with something else that's going to stay within that 4 to 5 foot range. But as everybody who's familiar with plants on this commission knows, that we go from something like a Rus aromatica to a bayberry, which is people are going to want to prune within the view corridor in the future. So we're just trying to keep it in that 4 to 5 foot height range to prevent anybody from trampling in there to prune that area in the future. And then we're planting all the areas surrounding that with winterberry holly, arrowwood viburnum, and bayberry, which allowed to grow, reach mature fruiting size, and are not going to be, that are going to be definitely obstructing views, at least from the ground layer. There's a significant amount of canopy from the second story layer, so we're just looking at one narrow 25-foot wide area. So I just want to make sure that in thinking about this, I'm happy to put in, if you want us to plant it all out with bayberry, I'm happy to put in all bayberry. Again, just trying to be forward thinking about the plan.
So your New Jersey tea are the little blue ones.
The New Jersey tea, the sea like this, is the blue with a dot in it. So there's some provided up in this mitigation planting area, there's some provided in the view corridor. And then in the view corridor as well is the sweet fern, which you've also pointed out. There's also Kalmia angustifolia, there's black huckleberry, there are Emelanthia, and there are bayberry in that area. And I completely can see how the symbols in the legend are confusing, so we can definitely clarify that. And I will
need to clarify that.
Yes.
Okay.
Definitely. But, I mean, we can definitely revisit that, and if you want us to remove the New Jersey tea, I'm happy to do that.
No, I just was trying to figure out where it was.
Yeah. I don't think it's significant.
No, you only have like 17 of them.
Yeah.
Okay. That's it for right now.
All right, thanks, Jen. Maureen, I think you'd be a good person to continue with this one.
First off, I think it was very difficult to know where the lot lines were since they weren't staked, Mike. The lot lines weren't staked. It was deceiving, the driveway where the trailer was parked. You marked, on your plan, you took the time to mark all the size of the trees that weren't even on this property. Yet, on this corner, where, again, this lot line wasn't shown, where all the debris in that big picture is, most of that isn't even their property. Because if you measured off the existing house, you'd kind of surmise where the lot line was. So we need the lot line staked in the field. That would be helpful. And that was the only, besides the sign out front, again, we're having the discussion after everybody tonight, that we're gonna go back to the orange spray-painted Concom site sign that used to always be everywhere. And somehow we've got fancy signs now, and we've got ones that are this big, and it used to be a standard size, spray-painted orange with a name for Concom on the side of the road. So we're gonna go back to that, so we can find these places. This one was easy. But we need lot line staked. So that's number one, that's all I had for you. Teresa, that's it. I already just asked, told them that. I just told them that. That wasn't on the plan. That's not even their property. I don't know if you use that driveway as calculation.
Let me clarify that. I was trying to be efficient in my words. This property and both properties on either side very recently were owned all by one entity, one family. The Freemans owned all three. They just recently sold the one we're looking at tonight.
Yeah.
They still own the one between this lot and Turner's Marina.
Yeah.
And they own a small lot between this house, but if you're on the street to the right. So it's like one big place. So they did what they wanted with the driveway
Okay.
and everything. That's
Okay.
why you see that.
Yeah, but you marked all the trees knowing that that was a different
Because we
lot.
did a bigger analysis for other reasons, so I just kept all the trees on there. So
Okay.
I never, to be honest, I didn't think you needed property line staked. I apologize for that.
Mike,
Honestly, I always stake
For
everything.
selling.
I'm happy to stake property lines.
when
It's
did
just
we
a few
stop
mistakes.
staking property lines? Was I know I was away for a few
Let me
weeks.
tell you a secret. I never stake my property lines, but I will now.
Yeah, you do, because they've been out there before. But anyway, that's a moot point. Teresa, I guess my major concern here is after going out to 80L Little Island Road and seeing what these restoration plans, I know they have to be ugly to be beautiful, but seeing live cedars this big cut down and oak trees cut down on a coastal bank with jute mats so that it's all, landscape with these little, your plans and everything else. I'm really starting to read these a lot closer now, and they're actually quite boilerplate, because I went through a lot of old files, and your management plans are, that's what they are, they're management plans, and they're very consistent. This site, to be honest, was one of the few sites I've been on that had almost zero invasives.
Yeah, me too. I agree.
But then I look at so you didn't tell us what was there native. We have no what native shrubs are there. You just said that they only gave us the invasives. So my question to you is that in your narrative, on page 5, and everybody, when you see all these colors and all these circles, you have to plant it, which means anything that's there is going to be gone. And everything that's there right now is native and healthy, and including the trees that have had their little heads hacked off. They are actually, they do create habitat over time. You see birds' nests in them all over the place. And if there's going to be a vista corridor there, you have this huge root system. They're not very pretty, but they do have a function. So on page 5, it says you're going to mechanically remove, by cutting a mechanical. What is mechanical?
Weed wrench for honeysuckle.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then you should say a weed wrench, because mechanical to me says bobcat, like I looked in a crane
There's
and
there's no room
over on Little
for-
Island Road.
Right. I just want to, can I just speak to Little Island Road, because I think there's an important point to make here. That there's been a redo of that plan that had nothing to do with Blue Flex Design. The property owner.
She's talking about the bank part, the one the board already approved. Teresa and I are gonna go out to.
We're gonna meet.
Yeah, we're gonna meet
But
on
nothing was
the
done on that coastal bank
Bank.
for restoration that was
Was
not
not
already approved by the commission.
I'm
So-
not saying it wasn't
Okay.
approved. I'm saying we ought to go look at them, because we might not be approving these anymore, is what I'm saying.
Well, to be frank, Jennifer and I did go out and meet on that site prior to us bringing a plan to the board, and there was a significant amount of previous damage. And frankly, on that site, if you remember, there was an existing order of conditions that allowed the previous property owner to cut cedars and oak trees to 4 feet high. So what we were trying to do was, and that was an order of conditions that had been issued many years
When they did the
prior.
seawall and the riprap.
Exactly, when they did the revetment.
But I'm just
So-
asking you, so even though there was an order, and you're an environmentalist, and you do all these restoration management things,
Mm-hmm.
that I think are very positive approaches to, wildlife habitat and
Right.
native species, to go, even if there was an order there, to go cut all that stuff down.
I did not cut that, so
Okay,
that was
So Blue
being
Flax didn't do
cut.
all that cutting.
No, wait a minute, let's
No,
be
no.
clear.
All right, let's get off that subject, that's a whole different
Yeah,
story.
okay.
Let's stay with this one.
Okay.
That's not tonight's topic.
Okay.
Okay, so, so on page 5, it says, the steep areas will immediately be covered with 100% biodegradable erosion control mats to protect the bank from erosion. Are we going to have a totally,
No,
well, then why did you have that, why is it in there?
thank you for pointing that out, that should
Well,
not
no,
be-
what happens is when there's a superseding order, I'm gonna tell you this, board, if there's ever a superseding order, what is in here is what they get. So it's in here, so afterwards, if we slip up, and we slip up often, and when we do, it's ugly, but then everything, these trees that aren't shown are no longer there anymore because they don't have them on the plan. So that means they can cut them down. So I just want the plan to depict exactly what's in that field,
Yep.
and it does not.
All the trees are shown on the plan, and none of them are shown with X's to be removed. And I know it's hard to
I
see,
don't,
my
well, I
plan's at
don't,
20
I'm sorry, I
scale.
don't see the Japanese pines in here that you say you're gonna be
Oh,
removed.
I'm sorry, yes.
So where are the X's for those?
No, well, what we're going by is under the regulations, in the past, anything smaller than 3-inch diameter breast height doesn't have to be, isn't located.
Those pines you are removing are way over 3 inch.
We're removing one
the
Japanese
Japanese
black
pi-
pine that's
Yeah.
circled in the picture.
But is it on the plans?
No, it is not on the
That's
plan,
what I'm
and
saying.
It wasn't located on the plan.
So none of those other evergreens are gonna be cut, just one?
The one that's circled in this picture right here.
Just that one? So the ones right up here to the right by the red clip, those are all staying?
Yes.
Okay.
Those are outside of the view corridor.
Well, I don't see them even on the plan.
I did not do the field survey, and I don't, so I was going with the trees that were located on the plan.
Okay. So I guess we're
So
gonna get a
what we need to do
continuance
is
anyway,
show-
so
right.
we'll square that away. I'm sure Jenny will square that away.
But your point is taken that there is an error in the land management plan about the blanketing, and
Yeah.
as you pointed out, a lot of this is handwritten, but some of it is cut and pasted, and that will be addressed with my staff tomorrow and that will be removed from the plan, and it will be very clear, and I think that's a point
Well,
very
thank you,
well
because
made.
these are all specific sites, and
Yes,
it's not
they are.
boilerplate.
You are right, and an error was made, and so
And if
something
we
was-
overlook that, and then we see it, and then we go out there and everything's removed.
There's no
and
need
it's
for
a
blanketing.
burlap.
This obviously, this coastal bank is what, 3 feet high? This is not nearly like a coastal bank like we're dealing with on ADL Little Island. So there's no need for there's no removal on the bank. As a matter of fact, we're planting more vegetation in front of the coastal bank to try and protect that bank. So that's a complete mistake on my part.
Well, and I think we need a percentage of the invasives. I walked that whole entire bank.
Yep, it's
And
very low.
I found one honeysuckle that was on the property. There was some on the other property, but there was one on the property. And then as far as the catbrier, which by the way is not non-native.
It's
It is a
not.
native
It is-
plant.
it
as
is a
well
native
as-
plant, yes.
As well as, and the best part about poison ivy that we leave in there is that then the people will not go in and cut. They might do it once, but they won't do it twice. So, and the catbrier was as small as a pencil lead. I mean, we think of catbrier climbing up trees. This catbrier wasn't even bad. I mean, so to go in there and spray and rip and tear, and, you know, I don't know. I'm really rethinking these management plans, because I think in the long run, there's more harm done than letting some of this stay the way it is. And the Vista corridor, when you say that they'll just go in and illegally cut it, I think that's doing a disservice to people that do it right all the time.
That was not my intention. Jennifer and I had a discussion earlier, and so I was responding to the comments that Jennifer and I had earlier. My only point was that we don't want to encourage anybody to have to cut anything within the Vista corridor. We want to be thinking long-term and plant it in such a way so that nobody has to cut. So nobody has to come back and ask permission to cut. Nobody feels compelled when their neighbor says, oh, you don't want to deal with that Conservation Commission, they're really tough. Say, oh yeah, take your pruners out at midnight and cut.
Well, no,
And
let's-
let's face it, you know what happens, I know it happens,
It
it
does.
happens all the time. So
But the
I'm
thing
just
is,
trying to
let's
think
give them
long-term.
sweet ferns so they can just run the lawnmower down there. I mean, that's basically.
Well, I mean, there's all kinds of other vegetation. It's not just a strip of sweet fern. Like I said, we're not trying to plant out a gap tooth view corridor in the middle of all of this tall vegetation. We have a lot of diversity here. So it's not done thoughtlessly.
Okay.
I really
And I
want to
think
make
in the
that
future,
point.
whenever we're gonna have trees that are gonna be cut down, they need to be ribboned and say removed, out in the field for all of us, so that we're not running out there with these plans, trying to measure a tree and figure it out. That's
Yep.
not our job. But
So-
when we see them all, when we see 50 red ribbons on trees, we instantly panic. But if we're out there and we're trying to find the 50 trees and we're assuming it's this one or that one, I just think that, and the last thing is the winterberry down in that area along the shore. I walked that whole, well, as far as I could walk on the shore.
That's
And-
actually Baccharis. And so I think that's where the confusion, because the symbol for Baccharis and the symbol for winterberry are almost the same. Are you talking about this area here?
The little yellow area down in the salt marsh. I thought it's.
Green area.
Green area. Oh, yeah, the green
That's
striped area.
Baccharis. That's a legend issue, and I will take care of
Okay,
that.
another
That's
legend
Baccharis
issue,
on-
okay.
yeah. And there is Baccharis existing.
Yes,
down
there is
there.
backwards.
Yeah,
That's why
there
I
is.
couldn't figure out
Yeah.
why you were planting winterberry.
No, we would not plant winterberry on the beach.
That's all.
All right, thank you, Maureen. Betsy?
My concern is, and I guess it's in your view corridor, where you say all trees less than 3 inches that have been historically cut and poorly formed are going to be removed from within the resource area.
That's this right here. That's what we're looking at in the view corridor right there. But I think, given Maury's comments, when the view corridor is flagged, we will also flag those oaks that we're proposing. This is basically what we're looking at for the view
A
corridor.
view
Yeah,
corridor doesn't mean it has no trees in it. It
Of
means
course
it's
not.
huge.
And my argument to you is that I think it's very challenging to categorize that as a tree at this point. It's been completely cut. The trees outside of that, the oak trees that we feel can be regenerated into canopy-sized trees outside of the view corridor, which is what we're showing on this plan here, will be allowed to grow. So they'll be pruned properly.
And
so
you don't
that
think
they're
any
allowed
of
to
those
grow.
trees could be
No, if you
rejuvenated?
look at page, we provided some post photos on page 4.
You could cut that down to 3 of those.
I mean, they're almost pollarded, but they're pollarded like 3 feet off
If
the
it did, you
ground.
cut it down.
Yeah, but go down to 1 foot off the ground and let
So
it.
we could flush cut them and allow them to regenerate into shrubs, we could do that, but again, I'm trying to avoid the need to have to go back and prune them in the future. Because we know they're gonna put on about 3 feet of growth per year, 2 to 3 feet of growth per year. So somebody will be coming back and asking to cut in the future.
This
I'm
is
just
in the A zone to the
I
no-touch zone
understand,
to
but
the.
the regulations allow a view corridor, and I'm just trying to be thoughtful about the management of a view corridor in the future.
But part of a view corridor, and I know you and Mark have had to go out, and when a tree grows up, you're able to take some of the branches off and allow
Right,
a view.
but these trees aren't going to grow up into canopy trees that we can then cut 15 feet high. They're gonna have to be maintained at 5 feet down, which is what the.
None of them will?
Not any of these that have this kind of cutting that we're showing on page 4 that are.
Well, then I
in
think you
this
should
area.
replace some of that with a tree or two there.
We could, but the reality is at this point, it's almost being punitive inside a 25-foot wide view corridor when we have a site that is so extremely well canopied. This is a really well canopied site. It's not that this site is denuded of trees, and we're not proposing to remove any canopy trees.
I'm just telling you, I went to another site that both of you worked on that we haven't had yet. And I walked down, and the same thing that was suggested, that the trees had been pruned, they have been pruned. And I'm sure it wasn't the people who now own the house, it's
Yeah.
people who owned it in the past. But there are trees on that bank. And you look to the left, and you look to the right, and there are beautiful oak forests on either side. And that's what should be there.
It should, but the regulations allow a 25-foot wide view corridor. That's all I'm
Well,
getting
you
at.
allow a view corridor, and those houses to either side, you think they don't have view corridors? They do have view corridors.
Yes, of course, and this has a view corridor.
The point
within-
is, well, I'm just saying,
Yeah.
on a lot of these projects, you say, well, the people have cut it down, and so these trees have been cut, and so we're gonna remove them and replace them with shrubs. Well, there should be some trees there.
Without a doubt, and I'm not arguing that there shouldn't be trees, but I'm just saying that there are already so many canopy trees around that area that removing these poorly pruned, poorly managed trees from within the view corridor and replacing them with shrubs is not going to be.
And are you
from
gonna
an-
remove the root systems?
Well, we would not remove the root systems, so we would be flush cutting them, yes. But we would not be removing the root systems. The root systems are playing an important function in stabilizing that bank, so not at all. But that's my only point, is that we have a 25-foot wide swath to deal with. We have an extremely well canopied site, and you can see, this is the area, right here. And it's been, and somebody's been, we're just taking advantage of what somebody has been historically pruning and saying, we just want to maintain this as a view corridor legally. So we want to come to you now, because I don't think whoever's been cutting at in the past has been coming to the commission and asking for permission. We're saying we'd like to establish a view corridor on a plan of record, plant it in such a way that it can be managed appropriately so it doesn't require continuous disturbance, and that it's on a plan of record. So if there's a tree missing just to the left, just to the right, just to the north, just to the south, then they've overstepped their bounds, and that's a violation unless they've come and asked for permission to remove it. But we have a view corridor that's established that these folks can maintain, that will be maintained in the future as on a plan of record.
Maintained not by the homeowner, because
Maintained by the fact that we're not planting anything that's going to need continuous pruning. Yes, that's what I mean by maintained, so.
Okay,
I have nothing else.
all right, Kevin?
now.
Kevin?
I'd be scared to enter into this
Yeah.
discussion. I'll
It's
keep
hard to
quiet.
know what else to say, isn't it? Courtney?
It sounds like pile-on blue flags tonight.
It's all right. It's been that kind of week, so.
But, you know, actually, Maury basically said it for me, as did Betsy. And I think the problem is that You've got a nice site out there that's got a lot of natural vegetation. Yeah, there's a few invasives here and there, some dead trees, there's some of these oaks have been truncated. And there's a stray Japanese pine, which frankly doesn't give me a lot of heartburn, but out there, I don't, but when I read your proposal, it sounds like if I'm gonna go out there, I'm gonna find this denuded site with all new stuff being put in, most of it growing about 3 inches tall, and affording a tremendous vista for the homeowner, which, may not be in fact what you intended, but that's the way it reads.
Okay, and that's a point.
And so I think we need a little more, I realize that this is great if you can generate it out of the computer and cut and paste it, and I do that stuff all the time. But, this is a case where you've got to be a lot more site-specific. And I'm concerned that if this plan were implemented as I read it, we'd have a horror show. I mean, as far as those oak trees, by definition, because they've been hacked at for a few years and they look like hell, we also have people come in here, maybe not you, but somebody else, and in very great learned things say, well, yes, this is a best management practice. We cut them down, let them grow, and it's just like done in old forest. So, I'm going, so I'm hearing from you that we should pull them out. I'm hearing from somebody else at another site, oh yeah, cut the tree down and let it sucker and then maintain it.
I appreciate that. I do
And
want to point out that
so,
we're...
I'm not a horticulturalist,
Yeah.
but what do I believe? Frankly, practical experience, you can prune those suckers back to 2 or 3, let them run, and they're fine. And if the tree falls over dead, so be it.
Well, I do just want to, again, point out that we are not proposing to stump sprout manage canopy-sized trees. So I understand that that's a management practice that's been brought to you before. That is not what we're proposing to do here. So we're not proposing to cut full-size canopy trees and stump sprout manage them as shrubs.
So I guess really what I'm saying is we want to see what you really propose.
Could I interject something here?
Sure.
It's a simple idea. I don't have a particular reaction to the specifics, or I didn't, looking at your submission. And it's not my field, but I think that my reaction to what Courtney's been saying is that this seems like, an involved management plan. And
Yeah.
you stand there and tell us the idea is that it doesn't need management. That, I think, is the discrepancy for me, anyway.
Yeah.
And,
That's probably yours.
so anyway.
Well, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we're still managing the landscape.
It doesn't, I think it's been discussed that.
Yeah, I don't think we need to, I think what we need to do is we've got some things that have to get taken care of. We'll go back and and trust me, my staff, I have 2 new designers on staff. We will all be watching this together, this hearing, so that we all have a broader sense, and we will then make these changes that you've requested.
The little voodoo dolls in the
The points are valid and they're well taken and they're important to make sure that we're incorporating. And so I'm hearing this as a critique and not as a beat up blue flags tonight. I'm understanding this as a critique and I'm taking notes.
What a nice positive outlook.
Thank you.
We can always make things better. And yes.
Let's try to keep moving.
That's how I taught school.
Oh, look at this side of the table, and just like keep moving.
Well, yeah. Mark.
I think I like the way Courtney presented it. It's, this plan, it looks like you're stripping everything out and starting over again, and really, I would think it'd be much better presented if you said, we're gonna leave all this in, and here's a couple areas that we have to put a
Okay.
little, that's all.
Thank you.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah, I agree with Mark.
I used to give an award
Additionally, I
for
have
a
one
shovel.
further question for Jen. Was the prior order of conditions of this property especially specific to vista pruning?
I didn't actually look at the prior order of conditions for this property, Peter, but We'll look into it and I'll have an answer for you.
If I may, I
No,
think.
I'll have Courtney pull all the old permits for you. Okay?
I think there might be some confusion, though. Maury and I were talking about the previous order of conditions at 80 Al Little
Yeah,
Island,
Little Island.
not on this
Not
one.
on
This
So I
probably doesn't even
apologize for that.
Great. Well, I drive by this site at least once a day, and I've always enjoyed it as being one of our underdeveloped areas, particularly on that street. And now we have a larger home going in, which was going to happen sooner or later. The previous owners owned 3 lots plus 3 more lots across the street, and they let them be native. And that's why I think you find them to be native. Whoever did this hacking, my impression was they used this house as a place to park the car so they could take the Alden sailboat out, where they had matching Alden sailboats, the brothers.
Yes.
And they were beautiful boats. And the house, as you can tell from its current condition, was not of big interest to the family. It was a parking lot. And that somebody trimmed this bushes for this view must have happened more than 15 years ago.
I would say based on the pattern of growth, yes. I would say it's been happening regularly for a fairly long time.
Right, and I think it's just a local landscaper who just
Yeah,
took his weed whacker when he was done with the lawn, which
yeah. Just
he
kept the
apparently,
view.
he did about twice a year. I mean, you know, it wasn't, they didn't, they wanted it to look like that, native. And I think everyone's comments are that it's not gonna require a heck of a lot of mitigation, other than that required because of the additional building site. But to maintain it and to remove anything, I mean, they've allowed it to become a boat dock over the years. I mean, they own where all those thingy docks are. I mean, the family does.
Okay, yeah.
It's not part of the lot for this particular house, but the family has always been generous in letting people keep their dinghies there on their land.
Right.
And we now have what is apparently an unbuildable lot that adjoins their property to the highway side. Oh, what, you think it might be buildable? Yeah, okay. We'll wait and see what comes in on that one. It's a smaller lot, and we'll certainly have problems with vehicle noise on that site as well.
It is by a highway, though.
Just hit every button, Steve, go right ahead.
This is
Sorry.
what happens when we haven't had a meeting in a while.
We have to try to balance the 2 sides of the table, so
You're-
I'm going to have to talk for
you're doing
23
admirably
minutes.
well.
But thank you. That's all I have. But thank you very much.
Teresa, how you doing?
Jamie, how are you? I've had better weeks, but sure. What you throw it at me?
Mike, just a comment, you don't have any AC pads, generator, or station? If you're gonna add them. If they're on there, I missed them.
I was looking at it so I could try to come up with an answer more than magically see them. No, I don't, but I will. And I think they'll be outside jurisdiction, but other than flood zone.
Thank you.
But I'll add them.
You'll have to have them out of jurisdiction because you have no more room.
Mitigation?
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking the same thing.
May 2nd.
Pardon? May
May
2nd?
2nd.
Would you like to? Okay.
At the request of the applicant, I make a motion to continue this to May 2nd.
Second.
Okay, that was Maury.
Yep.
All those in favor, May 2nd? Say
Aye.
aye. Opposed, unanimous, so moved. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're a good sport, Teresa. Thanks a lot.
Doesn't have much choice, but
Says I'm not coming back here.
send those other CAD designers up next time. Can't wait for the next one.
Everybody feel bad for Susan.
Why did you give me this?
Just put it in the file. It's just notes.
For this one?
Yeah, it's just notes.
That, if they're doing the lot
Why,
to the corner side?
Her computer shut off halfway through Lori's
You think?
spiel,
My-
and she
my
lost
rant?
everything.
We'll have to look at how
And I
many square
lost
foot are
everything
left
in
there.
Does that mean you're gonna have to listen to the,
All over again.
Oh, my God, you poor thing.
She's so sad.
I'm sure it's 10,000.
Mike,
square
don't
feet.
leave, you have a request for an extension.
Good night, Denise.
All right.
Who's just seeing Teresa out since she had such a rough
Good
night?
night. Okay, so the Wigwam Sipawissa Trust amendment has been continued. We move to Paul and Patricia, request to extend the existing order of conditions. Paul and Patricia Hogan, 112 Racing Beach Avenue, Falmouth, Mass. DEP number 25-3913, requesting a one-year extension.
Madam Chairman, can I ask Mike a question? Mike, this is
Of
the
course.
third extension. Why are we extending again? Last year it was because of landscaping.
Basically, all that's happening on this site now that we were hoping to keep the permit open for was to give him more time and life to the permit to avoid reapplying so that he can continue to have the ability to chink the voids in the riprap. He has Bill Armstrong sort of on retainer to babysit the riprap. Mr. Hogan is very concerned about maintaining the riprap, and he always have it monitored and look for chinks in the armor, if you will, and fill it by hand with more stones. So we thought we'd ask for yet one more extension. If you would rather, we can apply again. I don't even know if a notice would be required or an IDA, but we could just, if you think we've asked for enough extensions, I'm not going to argue. We thought we'd try again. If you say no, we'll have to reapply and ask for
RDA.
stone chinking.
RDA, what is it for? Just the seawall? Is that the whole project?
No, the whole project was
Landscaping and
Yeah.
house and...
Yeah, that was
landscape
all done.
improvements
That's all done.
and.
Right, close it
and-
out. Close it out.
close it out and do an RDA
An
for
RDA
the
for the
chinking?
chinking.
You can do an RDA?
Yes.
Yeah, you can do that. We're not gonna
Yeah.
make you do a new notice.
And that's
but
good
just
for
the-
3 years.
Yeah, just for the stone.
Good.
So just close it out and file an RDA.
Okay.
Okay?
And how long will
And
that be
compliant.
for?
3 years.
Okay.
So you won't be having to come back like
Every year.
every year.
So like every 3 years, you can apply for an RDA?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, that's it.
I
Okay.
think it's
That
just
was
easier than, we're trying to really like close out the files that can be closed out and archive them
That
and
makes
so
sense.
I think it just would be helpful to not take over.
So I think we need to vote that we're not approving the extension.
You're not approving.
All right?
Make a motion to not approve the extension.
All right.
Second.
Yeah, I think we
I'm
need a
sorry.
positive motion.
I'm sorry, yes.
It has to be a
Same
positive.
thing. I make a positive motion.
So the motion is to extend
Is
this
everybody
from 1
with
year.
us? Kevin, the motion is gonna be to make a positive motion to extend, but if we don't want to extend, we're gonna.
We all
against
vote
it.
no.
We all vote. I'm
All
voting
right,
yes.
so
Who
we have
seconded that?
Courtney.
I second it, yeah.
Oh, Betsy.
all
No, I
right.
did.
One of us.
All those in favor of approving the request, say aye.
Aye?
Wake up.
Opposed?
awake.
No.
No.
You, do we have more than one aye? All right, one aye and the rest, no. Good night, Mike.
And I'm like,
All right, now, I'm afraid that we have two
Well, they're silly in other
Items.
ways, aren't they?
of other business to discuss. And the first one, as I alluded to at the start of the meeting, involves some consequences from the decision I made to cancel the March 21 meeting for weather. And I will just start by saying that I did that primarily because we had three NOIs, two sets of representatives associated with them, because two of them were those Gansett Road things. The engineers from both of those would have had to come from off Cape, one from Duxbury, the Depreet guys would be coming all the way from Dedham, and I had to make the decision by noon. So I decided to cancel, and we got some favorable feedback from LEC on that when Jen told him on the phone. And she's going to give you a more complete chronology of the stuff that happened before the decision was made and then since. But I would just like to say that this is firmly in the camp of no good deed goes unpunished. I am extremely angry about this, and so, anyway,
I'll
Jen
give you a bit
will tell you more.
A bit of kind of chronology. So, yesterday afternoon, we received an email from Brian Wall letting us know that the Gansett Road projects will be seeking superseding order of conditions from DEP because this board failed to hold their hearing within 21 days. On Tuesday, March 20th, with all the weather reports coming in for last Wednesday, I had a discussion with Mary. She was concerned about the weather. Given the past 3 storms that we had, given that the week before there were 20 roads in Falmouth that were closed, there were multiple trees down, there was public safety issues. We sent an email out to all of the applicants on Tuesday, letting them know that we were monitoring the weather and that we would make a decision on Wednesday whether or not to hold the hearing. They were told on Tuesday. On Wednesday, we started receiving emails from the various consultants asking us if we decided to make a decision. And I spoke with Mary, and we decided that the best course of action, given from a public safety standpoint, given the weather reports that were still coming in, given that the weather was going to supposedly start around 4 or 5 when people were driving down for your meeting and getting really bad from that point till about 10 or 11 at night when people would be driving home, that it was probably a prudent decision to cancel the meeting. We did it earlier rather than later because we didn't want people to be driving down when we made the decision.
Yeah, and you told me that the decision had to be made by noon.
Yeah, and I said that.
It was clear to me that at noon, I wasn't gonna be have any better information between,
Yeah, between that.
It was time to decide.
And the
Who
noon,
knows?
Courtney, give me a second. The noon decision was just so that we were able to contact the people in enough time before they started to come down here and that they could contact their clients. The decision was made. We immediately started to contact all of the engineers who hadn't already requested continuances for other reasons besides weather. When we contacted LEC, Mark Manganello, his exact words to me were, "Thank you, thank you, thank you." I contacted him by phone at 11:52 Wednesday morning. I said, "Okay," please, and he's like, I said, "Please let me know what decision you make for continuance." "Okay, I will get back to you." Periodically throughout the day, we kept trying to reach LEC. Courtney sent a number of emails, and I called him back either once or twice throughout the day to try to get a response. I received no response at all. Positive, like not saying that they wanted a continuance and not saying they didn't want a continuance. I was basically just our reaching out to the consultants after they had indicated that this was not going to be a problem. I was met with absolute silence. I contacted Tom Bunker at 4:36 Wednesday afternoon saying, I can't reach your project lead, your local engineer, what's going on. And I got kind of a runaround response that, oh, somebody dropped the ball, nobody knew who was supposed to contact us, and, he didn't really know anything. Well, I received an email from Brian Wall at 4:15 who I had no idea was involved with this project. The project team that I had met with on site and in the office was LEC, BSS Design, and Blue Fox Design. That's the project team that I met with twice. That said, I received the email at 4:15 from Brian Wall saying that he had been retained by the Wares and that they were determining what the consequences of this board not holding a hearing were going to be, and he was going to let us know.
That was the next day.
That was Thursday.
Yes. Could I just back up 1 second? Is it fair to say that when you met on previous occasions with the project team, there was no particular reason for anybody to think that they were going to run into trouble on these applications?
I don't think so. I mean, we reviewed the project.
Right.
There were some questions and like tweaking of the plan, but it wasn't something that I felt, was going to be an issue going forward.
Right. Okay.
So all the other entities, all the RDAs that we contacted, the Dupree Engineering, who was doing the Helmut Circle, we contacted, and everybody was responsive to a request for a continuance date so that, people would stay off the road on a storm that at the time we made the decision it could have been really bad.
And they were predicting
And
power
given
outages here again.
given the fact that the previous 3 weeks, this area was hit with multiple power outages, it was, I think, the prudent decision to make. Unfortunately, and I don't know why, but the project team let us, when they thanked me for contacting them, they gave me no indication that their clients were going to have an issue with the continuance. I was not made aware of that, because if I had been made aware of that, I would have requested 4 of you come into the meeting and we would have held a hearing. So I think it was a bit
strategic, maybe.
I think it was absolutely done from a strategic stance to just not respond to our request. We tried multiple times. We have email correspondence, trying to reach out, and I have the phone logs from my office of us trying to reach out to the applicant's representatives.
Okay, so
so at this point, they are going to be requesting a superseding. Pat Harris would like you to take a vote to specifically refer this to council so that she can file an appearance with the DEP.
Okay, Courtney's been trying to...
Yeah, just real quick, to corroborate this decision, which, if you place it in context, I checked the National Weather Service that morning at 11 o'clock, specifically because I was hoping this meeting would be canceled, so I wanted to see if there was a good reason. And there was a high wind warning, there was a flood warning, and there was a winter storm warning with forecasts of 3 to 8 inches of snow starting around 4 o'clock with high winds and power outages. And given that context, and given the fact that we'd gotten hammered already in two successive weeks earlier, and if you looked at the TV and so on, everybody was canceling schools, meetings, and so forth. You just looked at the TV and there's one of those ribbons running across the bottom, Sacred Heart of so-and-so canceled. And so within that context, I believe our administrator acted entirely prudently, as did the chair, and did everything according to Hoyle. As far as I'm concerned, these guys are playing games.
Yeah.
And we should ask the council to pursue it.
Betsy.
So I'll make that motion.
All right.
I had a comment prior to the vote.
Sure.
And then I have a comment.
Okay. Go ahead, Steve.
I just wanted to note that the schools had canceled, had gone to a short day. and it canceled all after-school activities,
Yes.
including like my granddaughter's choral function that was to happen that evening. So all activities within Falmouth, as far as I know, were canceled formally by the school administration
Yes,
for
I agree.
the same period of time.
Yeah, that did feed into my decision.
Mhm.
Thank you. Betsy?
Okay, well, I spent a long day today working on actually much more pleasant town activities, but especially realizing I had enough money to finish what I'm working on. But I just put a few words together before I came down, and I just want to give you what my impression of this is. In my almost 14 years of service to the town on the Conservation Commission, this is the most egregious example of a lack of respect for the chairman, for the commissioners, and the conservation staff that I've ever seen. The role of the Concom and the Conservation Department is to protect the wetland resources of Falmouth that the town is dependent on economically, as well as the reason so many people choose to live here. Business in front of the Concom can be time-consuming and complex for all involved, and all of us recognize that. But this business functions best when there's trust. This action by the applicant and all his representatives is a breach of trust. It may be legal, but it's not morally or ethically defensible. And that's my comment for tonight.
Thank you. I agree with your comment.
Yeah, well said, Betsy.
So, we
Wanna
have
take
the,
a vote?
yes,
I
we have
make
the
a
motion
second.
and the second, okay. All those in favor of authorizing Pat Harris to represent us with the DEP on this, please say yes.
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 And anyone opposed? No. Who seconded? Maury did.
Well, we had already put it on. We had already put the motion on.
Yeah, that was earlier,
I just-
before these
Yeah,
statements.
Courtney and Maury.
All right, so does anybody else want to say anything on this topic? I have one more quick thing to say, which is actually escaped my mind at the moment.
Well, I
It's
haven't
it's shorter.
commented,
Oh, okay.
but,
I have a question.
Oh.
Oh, go ahead.
Peter?
I fully support Mary and Jen in this action.
Right.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah,
Jamie.
it was a prudent decision. My question is, when you, I don't know the word you used, notified everybody on Tuesday that this may be coming, what was the reaction? Was there anything
We didn't
negative?
really get a reaction, we didn't get a response. Like, we didn't receive any, we just sent an email out letting people know that we were monitoring the weather in the upcoming storm, and that we were gonna make a decision on Wednesday, late morning, early afternoon, whether or not to hold the hearing. Thank you, and we did not hear a response either way. We did not hear
They were the only
from
ones?
LEC or any other members of that project team that this was going to be an issue. And when I called and spoke with him, I was not given any indication that this was going to be an issue. It was, thank you, thank you.
Well, but
And when you
my point
tried
is
to
that on
contact
Tuesday,
folks-
if it was a real big deal, then they should have said, well, wait a minute. You know, we've got
Yes.
people coming in from Houston
It
or,
was,
you know,
it was
whatever.
definitely a strategic
Okay,
move.
so on that, so to take it further, on Wednesday, when you talk to Mark, I think it's more of a comment, I don't think it should be our or your responsibility to reach out to every member of the applicant's team.
No, no,
So-
the project lead was
And
marketing.
further, you did make the effort to contact everybody, but you can't make them respond.
Right.
No,
So
they
I
chose
think
not to
everything was done that could
respond.
be done. I think it was the prudent thing to do, because we just experienced 3 storms that were well, maybe not all 3 were problematic for here, but certainly 2 of them were. So,
And let's not forget that regardless of what ended up happening here, these people were coming from Duxbury and Dedham, and
Well,
conditions
the-
were worse up there.
they're the ones that would have said, you know, if we had the meeting, they would have said, oh, you made us come through the snow or the,
Right.
you know, whatever.
Oh, we couldn't make it, that wasn't fair.
Yeah.
Kevin wanted to say something?
Yeah,
Certainly.
well, first, let me preface it by saying I was in the office before the decision was actually made.
remember that.
But in talking about it, it made perfect sense because everyone else in the world was planning on bailing out. And I probably shouldn't say this, but I will. I bet you dollars to donuts they were praying that it would be canceled. They were really counting on the storm because they were going to do this anyway. As soon as they got the same weather reports we did, and this was their plan.
Oh, you're being cynical.
Perhaps.
I know, I'm being
Although,
skeptical.
the thing that really puzzles me and it irritates me is that it's not as if this was a particularly controversial hearing. I don't think anybody had reason, so what's the motivation for treating us this way? I just don't understand it.
Well,
but-
we'll handle it at a TEP level. I mean,
Yes.
this is not going to reflect
I think it's an insult
positively on any of
I
that
think it's an
project team.
insult to the residents of the town,
I think,
as well as,
I'm not
It was
gonna
just-
say
it was
in public
just-
what I think, but I
I think it was really.
It was just
know why
rude.
they're doing it.
They should be sentenced to stone wall.
Okay, Jen.
Oh, we have one other piece
Yeah,
of business.
remind me what
Okay,
it
no,
is.
it's okay. So for the Smythe case.
Oh, yes,
For
of
the regulatory
course.
Smythe case, we are appealing the jury decision. We have reached out to MACC to file what's called an amicus brief. It's basically a support document by MACC's legal department. We've had some conversations. Our attorney, Michelle O'Brien in this case, has been reaching out to part of their legal team, and they're willing to write the brief, but the MACC board has not approved that yet. She asked that, would the Conservation Commission be willing to write a letter requesting support from MACC? The board does like to hear from the commissions, and I think it's something we should do. So if you could vote to send a request letter to MACC to support the filing of a amicus brief by their legal team.
I'll make that motion.
second.
Okay, before we vote, I just want to ask a procedural question about this. Should all of the commissioners sign the letter?
No, it'll just be from the chair.
Okay, all right.
Just you.
Well, I just wanted to know because that's a logistics issue, so.
No,
Okay.
it doesn't need to be signed by the whole board.
All right.
You can sign it on behalf of the Conservation.
Yeah, this is litigation
talk
on
about it.
on a taking.
On the regulatory taking.
Thank you.
And-
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah,
I wasn't
I'm
familiar with the
sorry.
case.
We had a decision against us, and it's worth about $600,000, and we are appealing it mainly on procedural grounds. And
The location was?
it's west.
Wild
Harbor.
Wild Harbor.
Wild Harbor.
Oh, sure.
Alder Lane, was it?
Alder Lane, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Actually, that brings up something else,
excuse me.
that brings up something else as to why we're doing this. The money is involved, but also, and this is for everybody, is for precedent. I know you look at cases and you think that, well, I don't see what's the problem with such and such a place.
Right.
And it might not be in that place, but there's a precedent. And one of the engineers today brought it up.
River
He
Edge.
said, I remember I looked in another case and Mary pointed out that there were very specific findings in that case. So,
Topographical.
yeah.
For the river.
So this piece is.
And
So-
the precedent doesn't apply just to our problems in this town. This is people in our line of work, and at
Anywhere.
MACC, are watching what happens with this takings case, because it's gonna set a precedent all around.
All around
All over
Massachusetts.
Massachusetts, yeah. So,
Great. Well, I completely support the motion.
great. Okay, so
If we could get a little background
Yeah, I'd
on
like
the
to know why
case
you-
at some point,
Yeah,
yeah.
a little fact sheet, maybe?
Yeah,
That would be a good
maybe we
idea.
could have Pat Harris fill us in.
Or
maybe explain it.
Yeah.
Attorney O'Brien, or whoever it was that's
Yeah,
representing us.
she's outside counsel,
Okay.
so it's more efficient for us to just have that.
Forget to take the vote.
But anyway, we need to take the vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous, so moved. Thank you. And,
Move adjourned.
thank you. Second. All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous, so moved.
Jen?
Yeah.